Okay.
Board, so we added more kids activities to help entertain them. We also heard that a few attendees were bored and there wasn't really enough to like hold their interest for very long at the event. So then we added in street performers and some other interesting elements such as a firefighter competition that kind of helped engage people and help them stay for more than one meal. So they weren't just eating lunch and going home. 2017, it was super sweltering hot in Denver, and the crowd sizes of everyone coming up here and trying to escape the heat, it really degraded the experience for visitors and locals. So we responded to that. We extended the event by 1 block, spread out the vendors so that people weren't crammed in there shoulder to shoulder. We've been doing shuttle parking out at the middle school for years, but 2019, we started incentivizing it for people who were carpooling to give them just a handful of free hogbacks to use at the event. This is a Kansas City Barbecue Society sanctioned event. Kansas City Barbecue Society is the #1 sanctioning body for barbecue sports competition. Contestants compete for points and rankings in order to get into larger competition. Our contest has 2 different types of competitors. So we have the non-vending competitors who hang out on 3rd Avenue and they don't sell any barbecue to the public. They primarily go around to different contests and compete, basically. And then we have vending competitors, who is what you see on Main Street. They sell their food to the public and then they also compete in the competition. Our contest attracts 6 of the top 10 cookers in the nation at this point. We have become such a popular contest that people are just clamoring to come and compete here. And those are cookers that you see on 3rd Avenue. And having these talented cookers really helps us attract other competitors who are really eager to cook alongside the best in the nation. Our competition only spaces sell out in a matter of minutes. We launch registration in January. It sells out with it like super fast. The contest is also judged by 98 volunteers since it is a contest. We have 98 volunteer judges whose job is basically to come here. Most of them travel, a few of them live here, but they evaluate the food prepared by these cookers based on taste, texture, and presentation. And these spots are also so popular that they fill up in days. As for the other food vendors, preference is given to Summit County local vendors who pay about half the registration fee as other vendors. This event does take a village to execute. We have 6 nonprofit partners who do everything from selling beer, selling tickets, counting tickets, helping us divert waste, sell merchandise, and sell ice and pop to the public as well. And we reward them for this, going back to those early days of the folks cooking in the historic park. We reward them for this with over $50,000 in funding every year. We could not do this without them or the over 400 volunteers who unite over 3 days to make this event happen. I mentioned earlier, the event kicks off on Thursday. Friday has a reputation as being the locals day. Saturday is a little bit more geared towards destination visitors. According to the 2018 RRC survey that we did, 36% of these visitors stay overnight. The event ends on Saturday, which allows visitors, vendors, competitors, and judges to explore our marina, trails, and Main Street businesses before heading home. And one of the other ways that we incentivize them to stay and explore this is the hugbacks that people use over the couple days of the event. We then work with businesses to accept those throughout the weekend, which helps drives business into their stores. So while I mentioned that we've reduced marketing, it is still a very important part of this event, and I'll let Vanessa explain why.
So some of the marketing opportunities that we take advantage of during this event are ones that are not formally paid. So it is lovely to talk about our town and how charming our Main Street is and what a beautiful marina we have and the lovely trails we have. But media looks for other stories. And one of those stories is the barbecue challenge. It's another way to talk about the town, to elevate awareness. We often get national coverage. It's a way for people to think about Frisco as a destination for their next visit, not a day, but 5 days or a week to really spend in town. And we leverage that with the PR company we have, and we get typically over 45 pieces of PR each year around Barbecue Challenge. And we really think strategically about how do we talk about Barbecue Challenge in a way that differentiates it, because you could have a barbecue anywhere, but having it on a main street with a beautiful backdrop and a gorgeous mountains and not just an old blacktop parking lot in some urban center is truly unique. And it's also a way for people to understand what this place is really like. So the unpaid stuff is really where we get the people interested in the kind of place that Frisco is and support economic development in the town through destination tourism. That is not all, of course, and we wanted to know a little bit more about what that means. So that is why we did a survey. And the survey was interesting. It actually got more response than we are used to seeing, with almost 1,800 survey responses. We saw some really interesting stuff. 40% of the respondents were full-time residents and 70% of that group owned businesses. We saw that business owners were more likely to say that they had a positive economic impact from it, but there were definitely ones that said that that it had no impact, 30% in fact. And there were folks certainly who said that it had a negative impact. Businesses that were more likely to say it was good for their business, not surprisingly, restaurants. Eating begets more eating. It does not beget going and buying, you've heard me say this before, a sundress when you've eaten a lot of barbecue. Lodging companies also said it seemed to be good for their business as well, which makes some sense. We want to draw people to town. We don't want them just to visit for a day. We want them to stay here. We want them to extend their weekend. Both business owners and non-owners were asked to rate their satisfaction with the event. And business owners were less likely to be satisfied with the event. 69% of business owners compared to 85% of residents. And 87% of those respondents that did not own businesses in Frisco would like to see the event remain in Frisco. And about 64% of business owners recorded this opinion. So definitely less for the business owners than the community members. So you have that report from RRC, that third party in front of you. Those were the highlights, but there's a lot of interesting information in there. In fact, 821 comments to town council, right? Councilmember Fallon, a lot of comments about how to improve, change, not change, really the gamut of opinions. I read them all, but Nora went one step further and she actually decided to figure out, like, I've seen that comment before about parking and that people didn't know about middle school parking or that they want the event to go away. She went a step further and tallied up all of those comments and their sentiment. So if you're interested, it was actually fascinating to me. It's amazing what the mind pulls out and thinks were prominent themes, but don't so much suss out in the numbers. Beyond that, I think the important thing is, I think it's fascinating and wonderful that we have taken advantage of the pandemic. Not a lot of bright things have come out of that. One of the bright things, though, is how do we change what we do? And is what we're doing really serving the community? Is it something that, rather than thinking about if we need it here, do we want it in Frisco? So the three questions really become, to council, status quo. Do we want to just keep doing what we've always been doing before? Number one. The next one, do we want to make a major change and no longer have the event in Frisco for whatever reason? The second option is one that I think is really interesting. I haven't seen a lot of events dial back an event, but that is really what that suggestion, that second question to council is all about. Do we move to a back to basics event? And that means getting rid of some of the things that Nora talked about. We heard through that survey that people were more interested in food, getting together with their friends, and the music. Children's activities were actually fairly low on that survey. Liquid libations, they were number 4. So that's still in the mix, but they really talked about the things that they thought were most important to them. And those were the 3 things. So the back to basics is really looking at, do we get rid of the firefighter cook-off, the whiskey tour? Do we get rid of bouncy houses? Do we take the real, I would say, for lack of a better term, the more carny aspects of the event and the food away. So for you funnel cake lovers out there, that might not be a thing anymore. Really focusing on getting barbecuers here and getting back to basics. Yep, there are some places we would want to fill in if council wanted to go with this option. You can't eat meat all the time. We probably would want to throw some vegetarian stuff in there and likely some desserts. But we would really move away from most everything. Maybe some of the components we would keep are ones that align with town council's strategic priorities, especially around recreation. The 6K is really very popular. In many years, it has sold out. Pig races are incredibly popular, and Nora did the research, and they are in fact still allowed in the state of Colorado. So those are the things we would be looking to do to get back to the basics. Are there some pitfalls with this possibility? There are. The first one would be if there is an expectation that if we go back to the basics, the event will be very much smaller in that first year. I don't think that that would be the case. I think there would be a fair amount of pent up demand and curiosity about the event. So we would have to prepare infrastructure wise, everything from security to portos to selling hogbacks for that possibility. And then I think if people see that it's a more scaled back event, they may decide not to attend the event in the future. And we may at that point in the second and third year see kind of a natural attrition around that. But everybody wants to just do barbecue and music, and that's okay. I would say, beyond that, it is incredibly challenging to attract barbecue vendors. You'd think it would be very easy, but things have changed over the pandemic, and there are businesses that you've likely seen and known about, including our friends who do the kebabs. Todd Hilbert. Golden Toad, thank you. Not everything gets trapped in here sometimes. Very popular, but they're likely not going to sell at events anymore. It's just not a model that ended up sustaining through the pandemic. So we would probably have a fair amount of challenge with barbecue vendors. Why does that cause us some pause? You want to put on an event that's great. You don't want to put on an event that runs out of food at 1 p.m. on Saturday if you're supposed to be open till 6. So there would be some heavy lifts there, but we do have some concerns certainly around the new reality and how to make that second back to basics work. So those are the questions for council. We are available if you have any questions for us, but at this point hopefully we've given you enough information to have the kind of discussion that you were looking for when you ask us to do this in February. Thank you.
Maybe questions first, then we can dive into where folks are headed. And I guess the first one, Vanessa, just on what you were just finishing up with, do you think some of the challenge of bringing folks in is around like new public health orders on food handling and distribution in a crowded setting? Or what do you think, what are the other barriers of that you're worried about?
I don't think so much of that. I think some people have just, it hasn't held up. Like every summer, Golden Toad would go out and do a circuit and sell barbecue, and they didn't do that for a summer. The people who were doing that might just not be around anymore. The same thing a lot of our employers are facing. And then, Nora brings up a great point that we have talked about a lot, and that is over the past few years, not just because of the pandemic, public health has really across the country and state has changed. And there is not the kind of reciprocity that there was before. And so you do have to pay more for licensing, and you duplicate that licensing in different jurisdictions. So it has become a bit more expensive and onerous to be a vendor.
I just two questions and then is there a formula for the charitable contribution as to how the charities are receiving or what they're doing to receive the money? Whatever formula.
There is a formula for it.
Okay, so
yes,
basically paying for labor
rather than paying a for-profit.
Labor, we're paying it to the nonprofit for generating the labor.
Boom.
Okay. Similar, correct. And I've always wondered what's the benefit to to the challenge or to the event to have the non-selling vendors?
Oh, that's what an excellent question. The benefit is this, there don't end up being that many of those folks. It's a fairly small piece of real estate that they are on, but they are the superstars of barbecue. Just like Nora said, we attract some of the top barbecuers in the country, and it is all its own culture and a love of that kind of cooking. What that does is it actually does help us bring in barbecuers who can't make it onto that street because they sell out very quickly. That street sells out. They then are like, I still want to compete, but I'm going to be on Main Street and I'm going to sell. And it attracts for us that group of barbecuers. And it also, it puts the challenge in the event, barbecue challenge. Our friends with Rotary tried to do a barbecue event over in Dillon without that component, and it's no longer around.
Questions? You're right. You ran out of questions. So
I have no question. I got plenty of comments.
if there's no, yeah, let's
Just-
go. Yeah, go for it.
I'm
dude.
sorry, just quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm looking, just Vanessa, I know we've probably been around a couple times, more than a couple times. I'm trying to figure out the actual net expense of this event. And
Sure.
so I always start with for example, look at the actuals from 2019, right? Just in the budget, because I don't have access to any other numbers in terms of revenue distribution or expenses other than what I have here, right? And I'm sure, and I think you do, and that's the direction I'm going, I think. So when I break it down, just to be clear, in 2019, you have a net expense of 107,984. The budget numbers, the net expense is 145,098. So and then you have the donation to the nonprofits, which I'm assuming is just whatever your formula per rata distribution of the hogback revenue is going back to them, right? So it still all comes out of the same, for 2019, for example, it still all comes out of the same $478,435 number, right? That was the revenues for 2019. So just talk to me about where you got your number from and how you incorporate that donation as exclusive of that net expense, which is, I think, is where you and I differ. So when I look at, for example, the cost of the event, it appears to me that it's $145,000 in 2019. But I think you have you come at this a little differently. I want to make sure you have an opportunity to talk about that.
Sure. I mean, I would say Nora, to her benefit, included that spreadsheet. I've just included it so many times that I took it out. So I just clearly go through the spreadsheet that I provided to council several times for multiple years. And it is just the expenses. I work with finance, the expenses for those particular line items for barbecue. And then the revenue is on the other side. And this is the difference. And I can certainly provide, if I can get that done right now and give that all to you again for each year.
Yeah,
But I don't have that table in front of me right now.
okay, no, understood.
Yep.
You know, I've certainly, my thinking on this has evolved in terms of the hard cost, in terms of how it influences my perspective on the event overall. But I do think it's important to kind of get to a number that we could say, this is what it costs, you know, whether it's, you know, and those are the hard costs, those are not the soft costs, again. And of course, it certainly doesn't include the soft economic benefit, which would be the secondary, tertiary spends, the dollars turning in the economy as they come in. So it's, I don't want to get too hung up on that number, and if nobody else really cares, and I certainly don't want you to go down that road. I mean, I think I appreciate where you're coming from, but I just wanted to bring it up just because I wanted to have a starting point, if you will.
I think Councilmember Fallon, we can probably get to this, which I can totally see. There's some stuff that's not included, like labor. There's a little bit of overtime from the police department. The rest of the folks would be working anyway. And then there are some special event staff that equals about $6,000, somewhere in there. The event would typically cost between, including the nonprofit donation, because that is part of this event. That's how we pay for some of this labor. between $100,000 and $200,000, somewhere in there, including that nonprofit. Completely comfortable saying that. That's where it would typically land. And absolutely, you are right. Businesses do not report their sales tax by day. That would give us a pretty good snapshot of year to year what this event does. You're right on that soft revenue side, but the event clearly costs money. And that's very clear. And it is, I do chuckle a little bit when people are like, wow, it doesn't make money. Well, what I would say is there is a reason why municipalities own things like Red Rocks and the biggest performing arts complex in the United States in Denver. Even the Villar Center, this really incredibly successful nonprofit. My former world, I was always like, they must make bank on their tickets. And they don't. It covers about 25% of the cost of a show. And a lot of events, including 4th of July, you're absolutely right, Fall Fest, are events that we put on for different reasons, not to make money. And that is a different way of looking at it and completely valid. If it's something that council wants us to go in the direction of that we need to make money on events, that is then a very different way of planning events and looking at them.
To be clear, that's not, that's not the point I'm trying to make. Should it be revenue generating or not? Just trying to understand the cost of it. And to the degree that it either influences or doesn't influence some people on the council to help them kind of estimate their community relevance, that's up to them. I just wanted to approach it from a number, and that's always been my question. So that's good. We get it. At least I do. I understand where you're going, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness of that. So I'm good. But I don't.
To be clear on that, if we can, that means the town basically in the red, 107, beyond the expenses and everything else. No,
That's it.
that's
At least in 2019, that was it.
okay. All right.
Other questions, thoughts on that line?
I don't know if it's the right time to ask, because what would it look like if we had a $50,000 cap on our willingness to, let's throw the event, but our maximum loss is 50,000. Has that been a conversation that's taken place? What would change?
Wow, that's a big question. Would take away, because you can't take away porta potties. You can't take away security. You can't take away there are a fair amount of the labor. Volunteer labor. I guess we could look at volunteer labor very differently and not have nonprofits benefiting. We'd probably need to take away some music. That's really the thing. Like, how do you look at the nonprofits? Is that not a model we want to do anymore? Would we be able to get more than 400 volunteers? It's a fairly heavy lift to get that many volunteers, but could we get more than that on our own? Could we pay for some of the stuff? Like, there is some stuff we would want to continue to pay for, like counting tickets. What can we look at in terms of music and reducing the amount of music? That's really what you start looking at.
And the size of the event as well. You don't need as many volunteers if the event is only 75%
Right.
of what it currently is. You don't need as many cops or porta potties.
Yep. And I think if you could go back to the future, that would be a real possibility. And that was kind of our point with that second option. The cat's out of the bag and the cat's super attractive to people. They like it and they want to come up here and pet it and they want to be a part of this. And I think, could we someday get to, rather than 12 to 14,000 people, we could get to 7,000 people? Possibly. Absolutely. I think we're pretty fabulous at throwing events and we're a great location. Why wouldn't you want to come here? I think it's possible, but it would actually, amazingly enough, take a little bit of time to put that cat partially back in the bag again. Jeannie, I like to think of it as a cat for some reason, maybe a puppy.
I only disagree because that's just, there's always the opportunity to be creative. We're only limited by our own creativity in how we reconfigure this project.
Yes, but if I may, to tie the hands of your people by cutting back what they've built, to decide what they have to cut out and all that sort of thing, you're killing morale. right? You know, I
I'm
mean,
more
for,
just-
for the people to
I'm
make it all
exploring
happen.
options.
Personally, that's my belief, like with my own people. You know, I wouldn't want to lay that on you personally. I would want to lay more like, what else can we do with $100,000? What can your team do with that, you know, to be more effective?
This is a conversation of,
Sure.
this is a conversation, of let's lay options on the table. One of them would be, how can we spend $100,000 better? The other is, what would happen if we only spent $50,000?
Right. What would
we
happen
make
if
a
we-
great, you know, it's not about the dollars, it's about the event.
Sure.
I'm not advocating, it's more
I think we could
exploring.
I think we could get there. It's just a matter of understanding that the crowds would need to lessen in order to get there and reduce the amount of infrastructure. I agree. We can absolutely think creatively, but I think we need to be real about the fact that we need to have infrastructure, especially at the beginning, to expect a lot of people. And then we need to think long and hard, like people said they like music the most. Is that something that council feels like is an important component? Or is that a component where we would cut back? We can absolutely be creative about it. It just may take a little while to dial it back to that level. And what I'm trying to say, dial it back, like reduce the amount of people, because it's a popular event. It has huge legacy. It has incredible draw. People are still liking the Facebook page for barbecue. We've hardly put any information on there at all because it has a very good calling. You've done a very good job as a town of making an event that you're clearly identified with, for better or for worse.
I guess I'll just ask council really quickly, just so we can start working through some of the, getting towards a decision for and feedback for the events crew is, I don't think there's any support with the status quo, correct? Just making sure we can get
I
rid
will
of it.
say,
Yeah.
ever on any topic,
Yeah.
we should always be
All right,
exploring.
so I'll scroll,
better
so
ways to do
status
whatever.
quo. I'll throw it out there for conversation's sake. I think, I mean, you look at the survey results, you look at the interest, you look at the fact that we had more people who could participate in this survey and, you know, locals than we did for a short-term rental, which seems like a more pressing, important issue, but more people care about actually giving their feedback to this than something that truly affects our community. I think scale it back. I'm all for it. I think bring it back to kind of a backyard barbecue on Main Street instead of the barbecue for all of the Front Range on our Main Street kind of approach. And see, and I definitely appreciate, Vanessa, what you're saying about you just can't, you know, cut back a tiny bit and expect that to happen overnight. It might be a 2 or 3 year phasing, but I think, as Andy said, there's the creativity is strong with your team, and we've seen that. So I'm in favor of. I think there's just a super support for this, but I think the more we can make it a community focused event than an outsider event, the better, in my opinion. I think getting rid of it would be detrimental. I don't think it benefits us in any way by just axing it completely, but would love to hear other thoughts or ideas.
I think we can meet, to just frame it up a little differently, instead of a price tag, scaling back, as the memo suggests, the participant list heads us in the right direction. And I agree, it is, the surveys are clear. It's not benefiting the businesses, but it's a clear community event with huge legacy that I don't think should go away. But I think we can head there based on the suggestions you've given us in the memo, Vanessa. So thanks for all the work. A lot of information, which was cool, right? I mean, but just figuring out, like, we've got all these volunteers, but then we pay the just that circle of where the money train is going there was educational. You hear the number of what we spend, and then the same sentence, you hear about 400 volunteers. That doesn't calculate unless you get into, okay, how did that all work? You know, for me, you know, and hopefully our parking, you guys will figure that out, but it's not going to be like we had, you know, you guys know the year I'm talking about. I think we're beyond that. So thank you for all the work.
Yeah, jump in here.
What I'd like to do, I mean, I just popped out a couple of the comments that, you know, in the world of direction guided my thoughts. Commenter number 79 said it's probably the biggest event all year, obviously a huge success. I believe that person measured success by the number of people that were there. We need to define what success for the barbecue means, and I think that's kind of where we're headed right now. Number 268. Every year we say we won't return, and every year we find ourselves throwing up drunk behind the snowshoe. We'll be back even if the locals hate our guts. I don't think we're designing the event to encourage him to come back with his friends. That's not the atmosphere that we're looking for.
It's one stop too early. He meant to be in Breck.
Number 385, this was one of my favorites. You were elected by the people. Would be nice if you did what you were elected for, to listen to the people. Here we are. But I also, it made me think, should we listen to the ones who say it should be bigger or the ones who say it should be smaller? Should we listen to the ones who make it more kid-friendly or more party-oriented, make it the same or make it smaller, keep it or scrap it? So I just found that an interesting one. The other really interesting one I loved was number 447, too much county fair food. Otherwise, it's a wonderful gathering for all. Please keep it going. Love the jalapeno peppers. How do we do that? And the last one, which I really liked, and it was 495. In the healthiest and cleanest environment in the entire country, we have an event that represents all the worst aspects of American diet and sustainability practices. Frisco prioritizes better practices 362 days of the year, but for 3 days, we throw our health and sustainability principles out the window, and I'm not sure why, because I hear it's not a moneymaker either. I would like council to consider why Barbecue Fest is currently the signature event for our town when it is so not like what our town is or wants to be, which I say goes back to success, which then took me to our council priorities: community, economy, environment, cultural arts, and core services. So this event is large enough to look through the lens of our council priorities and make sure we're there. And I don't think we are. I would like the direction, my suggestion would be the direction of the event is looked through that lens. Guide us to a better place. That's, thank you to the 821 commenters. Those were the highlights for me.
It was really a good read, I have to say. I found it very interesting. Nora read it several times, and just a heads up, make it bigger, 18. Make it smaller, 38. And I thought for sure that it was a lot more, make it smaller. But it was 38, it was 20 more than that. I guess I would just say in a conversation with each other, what does that mean to make it look through the lens? Does that mean that it is, let's be real, I mean, it's a meat event. That is not super sustainable. Does that mean that that outweighs the stuff you're talking about in terms of community? How does looking through that lens and the kind of expectations you have around that change?
It'd be meat and. It's not only meat, it's only meat because that's all we've done. But if we want to say, okay, let's transition, let's blend it with some other concepts that not only will make it more reflective of us as a community, but expand it to a different dynamic. Somebody mentioned international barbecue. I don't know what that means, but it's something other than brisket. So I just really love the potential of expanding the concept of the event while reducing the magnitude of the event.
So through your lens, Andy, you're not in favor of eliminating the event
Absolutely.
You're more
No, I love the event,
in that kind of
but I think
second.
we can do it better.
And I think, Rick, would you say you were in the same way with your reframing of kind of keep it in that per the staff report, the option number 2, which is get back to basics and see what that looks like.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think just getting back to basics just means same as we are, just less.
Mhm.
I want to challenge you guys. You've got creative people doing wonderful things. Bring us a revised, not just back to basics. Better, different. I'm not afraid, let's be reflective of, we're different. We as a community are different. And what'd you say, 1992? Look at Frisco in 1992. Is that where we want to go back to?
The fashions are back, but we are different.
Yeah.
Frisco in 92 was really excellent. I would be very happy to go back to Frisco in 92, but I know we can't. Right? But if we look at council's priorities, I believe this does not line up with council's priorities at all. I know, the businesses that I know in town and the businesses that I talk to in town get absolutely crushed for that weekend. That has always been a thing forever. And, I know some businesses, lodging does okay because they get filled up and all. I could go on about a lot of things, but this would be an awesome event. Thank you for building this incredible event that has outgrown our ability in our town, right? This event would be awesome at Copper Mountain. Personally, I've felt that way for a long time. If we have to keep it, then why not put it at the Adventure Park or at the Marina or something? Because that way you don't close the businesses down. Because the bottom line is we closed the street. Every business is not even accessible. And that is the bottom line. I mean, it's like, it's great. It's a fun time. It's a party and everything else, but it's costing us an incredible amount of money for what it is. It is the size of an event that we're not, as a council, we discussed not trying to draw that many people here, right? We want to focus on locals, right? And this is, locals come down on Friday night, but then locals pretty much avoid it as far as I know for the rest of the time, right? Honestly, the street is absolutely disgusting when it's done. And street cleaners don't do it justice. You have to wait 2 months for it to actually kind of wash away off the street. You know what I mean? Like this is real, right? And this has been this way for a very long time, right? Sustainability. How does this? What part of this actually lines up with that? Right? I mean, like where on the spectrum is that?
We have
Right.
recycling.
We have recycling at this event with so much trash and everything else, right? Let alone here we are with masks, we're still in COVID, right? And even though we did the promenade because that was because of COVID, whether or not we do this, we did the promenade, we shut Main Street down for the businesses, right? And we focused on the businesses and the businesses were able to thrive. And then we had an issue of some businesses weren't actually in that area and they couldn't thrive as well, right? And there is an inequity there. But the thing is we shut the businesses, we shut the road down for our businesses. All of these outside vendors coming in and raking it in and leaving town does nothing for us, right? Do we have to make a big party for everyone? I don't believe so. Again, I think whether we like it or not, more and more people are coming here, right? There is nothing we can do aside from shutting the tunnel down, which we have no say over, to stop people from coming here endlessly. As the seas rise, people are going to move to the Front Range. They're going to come here on the weekend, right? And that's the way it's going to be. So, I would really love to see $100,000 and our incredible team focus on some locally focused events, locally facing events and that sort of thing. And, we could maybe hand over the reins to Copper and assist or whatever. We would still get some overflow then. People would come down, they would, spend money in town instead of just coming here, partying, trashing it. My kid got pink eye on the blow up slides or whatever that is, right? It's like nonstop. And we're not in that world anymore of, right now concerts are going on and, they're still being super spreader events, right? And so that's where I lay with it. I could probably go on for another hour about this, but I won't. There are many more points to hit, but, our strategic priorities, I believe, don't align with this particular event, only because you've done such a good job at building it to a massive event. And that's what happens when you're trying to succeed at the thing that you're doing, right? But then all of a sudden, to say, oh, you've done such a good job, now here's half of it, and let's tie your hands and see what you can do with it, like, good luck. You know, that I believe is shooting yourself in the foot, shooting your people in the foot. That's what I believe for that. I would rather see those resources and our time and effort going towards something more constructive and more, you know, reasonable for our town and more of what we want. That's my bet.
Can I go?
Yeah, jump in.
We spent a lot of time, talking about this. We had Insights Collective in here. We spent a lot of time talking about what the focus ought to be with marketing dollars, with recreation dollars, how we invest in our community and what our expectations are, and how that investment should align with our community goals and values. And, I agree with Andy. This event, to me, does not seem to really incorporate those. I look at 634 here, and I scrolled through this and read a bunch, and after a while, you kind of get the sense of where things are falling, but you kind of look for that one comment that really helps you summarize. Well, 634 does for me, and it says Frisco is at capacity in the summer. I don't believe we need to host large events to draw more people. I realize there's a way of thinking that this is a signature event that builds marketing equity and trying to bring people here and to keep them coming back. I believe this approach and way of thinking is outdated. Frisco doesn't need more people. They are traveling and coming here regardless. Try focusing on the quality of their experience here instead of hosting big sprawling events that have served their time and should be left in the past. Time to think in a new and different direction. And that really does sum up what I've thought about this event for a long time. I think it's a misallocation of resources, and I've stressed for a long time that money like this needs to move in a different direction to help create something, a better experience where we've been focusing our investment for many, many years, which is Marina, the PRA, and trailheads, trails, and our Main Street experience exclusive of contrived events. And I think it's important too, we haven't had this for 2 years, and I didn't miss it. We didn't, and we were just fine. And I know that's why we're having this conversation, but, and I've come back to the numbers a couple times, and, like I said, I'm less, the numbers themselves, the cost is less, I'm less hard line about it. I used to really be all about the numbers on this event and why they should be, put somewhere else. But, over the last several years, we've really seen that we really need to look at this event one of two different ways. And it's either this event that is this integral part of our community now. It represents something that really is a signature event, and therefore it should reflect community value and broadcast community values, or it still continues to be, at the end of the day, a marketing. That's how it was contrived. That's how it evolved. And it really has to be one or the other. I agree. I don't want to pay really good people to devalue the event. That obviously has so much value. I've maintained for years that, as it's grown, that it needs a bigger venue, a venue that really can really put even more into it. Copper to me, I wish it's something they would consider, because the derivative benefit to Frisco is vast by having it just 6 miles down the road. And I know we've gone down that road a little bit and had some conversations. I have no idea where they are, but I think it would be wonderful for them. I think it would be wonderful for Frisco. I don't see this as any more being a community event. I know it's popular for a lot of reasons. You just have to read through the sentiment survey and understand, the value people place on this event. This is difficult to represent that segment of the community that doesn't find this valuable anymore. I just don't, from a business perspective. We don't need it from a marketing perspective. It doesn't represent our community values culturally, sustainability, all the things Andrew so eloquently, Andy held so eloquently pointed out. So it's odd, though. I find myself in weird conflict. I hate if we were to keep it, I would want to keep it the way it is. I don't want to, I don't want to re-engineer it. Because I don't think we can control that. For the very reasons Vanessa said, the message has been broadcast and it's being heard, in new places all the time. And whether it's from impressions from 2 years ago or impressions that are about to put out, it's just reaching new people in the way that when you broadcast something out in the universe, different planets are getting it at different times. So I don't know, I can't, nor can we account for what people are hearing. All I know is that what they're going to expect when they get here is that light that they've seen from 2015 and 2019. And I don't think you're going to succeed in dialing this down for the same reason that you're not going to see us successfully dialing down traffic for any reason, because it's outside our control right now. We've been successfully sending out ambassadors from Frisco for decades now, but certainly within the last 10 years with the acceleration of social media, with our focus on really creating these great high quality events and high quality amenities. All we've done is send out ambassadors for 10 years, and all they've done is tell people what a great place this is to come, and they're going to hear about a barbecue challenge. They're not going to hear about how it's slightly devalued, and it's just not going to matter. It's going to be, the parking's going to be the same. It's going to be just as busy, and all we're going to do is displace. You might lose some of the people who appreciate the carnival atmosphere, but all you can do, it's going to be replaced by the people who love the fact that it's now a local event, and 12,000 people from Denver are going to come up and enjoy our local event. So, I really love to see the success of this stay close by. I'd love to see us really work hard to find a partner where the venue's larger, where there's more parking, where we can enjoy it, where people who come to enjoy it in a different location can come to Frisco and enjoy Frisco for what we are, for what we want to project. So it's odd, it's very bizarre juxtaposition of ideas here, but at the end of the day, I think we need to be done with this event. I think, and it's difficult to say because of the broad support it enjoys, but it really isn't something that I think we need to continue to put money into. I think we need to take that money and find another way to create quality experiences here for people, because those people we demonstrated are they're here, they're coming, and that's what they want. I'd rather put this, here's my last pitch. You can hear it coming. I'd rather put this $100,000 a year to ice.
Well, in
the
June.
reason is because that's the kind of enduring amenity that we give to our children. That money is that's a valuable investment. We're giving an experience and a place and a safe place, and that's what this community to me represents. And we can activate a place that really is just lying dormant right now, and that has way more potential than the barbecue challenge ever will for attracting people here for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. So, but that's the second half of your. And again, yeah, it could go on, but again, it's for me, it's not about the money anymore. It really is just is not an event that resonates with me, and the sentiment survey was great, and thank you so much for aggregating this. This is a phenomenal piece of work that you guys have done to put together to represent this and what it means to the community. And you can probably dig through this and anybody can peel out of it whatever they want, but it's obviously popular. I get it. But I think it's time that we start looking for other ways to create this kind of experience.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I'm kind of conflicted in some of the same ways, Dan, is except for the wanting to go, if we're going to do anything, just go back to what it is or get rid of it stance. But I mean, I think a few things. One, I think when we ask for feedback from the community, we need to take that into strong and serious consideration. And we heard pretty overwhelmingly from locals, visitors, and businesses that it's received well. And I think the numbers also say it doesn't impact the businesses in a way that is so detrimental that would be an easy to say, let's get rid of it based on what the survey said. I think the sustainability, that doesn't even rank. We can't even get there in some of our council values. But eventually we have to have some sort of event. Like ice is awesome. I get it. I know what you're saying. But something that is every day is different than a specific event that brings people, even locals, down to Main Street, like the concerts in the park on Thursday, right? Like without events, you don't have culture, you don't have community, you don't have character. And we have to have that. And I think closing down the Main Street for 2 days, or hopefully, in my opinion, for the foreseeable future in the summertime, but that's a different conversation, obviously. That's what creates that sense of belonging and community and small town feel, where when you are walking around, you do see people. And I think Vanessa's team's hearing it. Like, we want it community focused. We want it downsized and smaller. We want it to meet the goals of what we just, everybody said, even the negative goals of we don't want to draw people. I don't think we want to create an event to draw people. We want to create an event that people want to come to who live here within the county. And I think we can do that. And I think, to me, we should listen to the survey results. I think it's an amazing event that can get pared down successfully. I don't think we're handicapping anybody. We've already seen it, but yes, people are going to come, and that's where I do struggle. I mean, I look at what I hear. I didn't attend, but Breck's Oktoberfest, they tried to downsize it, and it sounded like a pretty massive failure from the few folks I talked to who went. So that would be my fear, and that I think that's real. But and I keep hearing people say more community centered events, but no one ever offers up what those are. So I'm all for it. And I think if we had 1 or 2 other things to put on the table in the coming years, let's do it. But in lack of ever hearing an actual event that people think would be a community focused thing, I'm all for keeping this going. People love it. I support it. I think the majority of the businesses owners don't see it to be a hindrance to their success or their ability to do what they do. And I hope we've heard a lot of feedback, and I think we have support at least from 3 of us up here. So kind of in the majority with that, but yeah, I know you wanted to address something. I don't think any other council members. Yep. So I think that's, yep.
You know, personally, from having professionally run events for a living, and in similar situations in different places, to me, it seems that this event has been built to something. Let it keep going, let it keep building, send it to Copper, whatever. We take resources and we put it into new events, and we start the process from the beginning. And then you have new people, you know, whatever, beer fest, not beer fest, because there are too many beer fests. But, and, you know, right now, I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is, but I can tell you, you know, putting the long-term, the effort into the long-term solution, be it ICE, be it the Nordic Center, be it whatever else, you know, that allows us to then open it up to worldwide potential events. You know, this place is not known, or should not be known, as the barbecue capital of the United States, right? We should be known as like the place to train your cross-country skiers in order to go to the Olympics, right? Or the place to, you know, to whatever, get lost up in the mountains, right? I mean, you know, personally. So I wholeheartedly disagree with the idea that this is our defining event, right?
And I don't think it is. I think
you
it's
know,
just a
and-
great event people love. I don't think it defines Frisco by any means. I mean, it's not on our.
What you said, what you're looking for.
No, I'm not. I'm looking for a community event. I'm not looking for something that, like, I don't think we need a marquee event. This is
Right.
one event among many, and I think it ballooned a little big over the years, and now we're saying, let a little air out and keep it going.
Yeah.
And we're doing the
It's-
opposite, you
again,
know,
It's hard to do.
it's
Professionally
very hard to
speaking,
do.
Very hard to do. You're making it really hard on your own people. That's the bottom line. I don't know that they would honestly say that at the moment. I would love to hear your input.
I'm gonna disagree a little bit,
Sure.
because I think we have people whose greatest asset is their creativity.
Of
So
course.
yes, being creative and creating something different is new, but it's also exciting and fun. And so I would hope you tell us if reinventing an event is viewed as a negative challenge as opposed to a positive challenge.
Oh, I don't feel like it's a negative challenge at all. If an event is not meeting council's goals and priorities around community, I think it's an incredibly interesting challenge, and it's not unprecedented. The state of Oregon kind of did it as a whole state. Their moniker at some point was Oregon, maybe it's not maybe it's not for you, I think was their line. I know, crazy, right? But they were seeing people visit the same spots so much. It's not an event, but consider the state kind of one big attraction, that they were like, we don't want that to go that way anymore. And I've always found it to be an incredibly interesting incredibly interesting study on how you could actually do that. And they've had some success. I would say in terms of this event being Councilmember Fallon being contrived, I would totally go down that road if I really believed that to be the case. But in fact, a bunch of locals were in the historic park and they decided that they wanted to have this event. Do I think that it's gotten too big and maybe out of sized and we shouldn't have so many funnel cakes? Yeah, I do. Do I know that it's absolutely going to succeed and that we're absolutely going to be able to do this thing? I don't, but boy, I think we want to give it a try. If you want us to, if you think it's important to the community, we're absolutely up for creatively tackling it. And I don't think we have any compunction about that. Like, that is the interesting part of this event, is the basic stuff. People getting together, barbecue and music. That's the interesting stuff, really. And to cut away the other stuff is an interesting challenge. And to do less marketing is an interesting challenge. I mean, people won't just still keep coming. I mean, in 1993, the state of Colorado said, you know what, we don't need to market anymore. And they cut out a $12 million budget. And in 2 years, they saw their market share drop by 30%. You can do it. It can be pretty yucky, but it can be good too. I've seen it work, that you can do less marketing and you can cut out components and have less people come. I think it's a grand and interesting experiment. Nora, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, we've changed events several times in the past. I don't know if you remember back to that events discussion in February, but we had several events that just weren't working, who we did say, okay, let's not have this anymore. We have other events such as Fall Fest that used to be Beetle Fest, celebrating the pine beetle epidemic in the town, and that was no longer really fitting the needs of the event or the community, and we made appropriate changes, and it's still a very popular event. So we are definitely up for this challenge, and we do it all the time.
I mean, and we were with the Fall Fest this year, we really had this strategic conversation, like, oh my gosh, please don't have too many people come. Like, we can't deal with that. But also, I did so little marketing. We did such little marketing as a team. We're like, I hope it's not 5 people around a keg. And we about hit the sweet spot. This is a much bigger challenge, but if you tell us that you want us to go down that road, we're up for it, to answer your question.
And we do have, we're up against time in the school district this year, but I just say, I think you've heard from majority is, I won't make any trimming the fat jokes in a barbecue conversation, but I think you heard the concerns, especially, I think, take note mostly of the concerns and direction, and look forward to a follow-up and where we're headed.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Vanessa.
Next up, this evening's work session is agenda item number 2, and this is a Summit School Board strategic plan presentation. And welcome the interim superintendent, Roy Crawford. I don't know.
Familiar faces there. Yeah. Do you need us in a certain place or using the
If
mic?
you're, if someone's,
here?
close, either when you're at the lectern, close to that mic, or
These 3
yep.
mics are live.
Sure, and we sent a video and a slideshow. Okay.
Deborah should have that.
You're
Good
the,
show.
you're the tech person.
Slideshow, and the video is embedded in the slideshow, but it
Okay.
is a YouTube video, so sometimes it's better to have it keyed up. Otherwise, Roy will make
So-
me ad lib, and that's.
Yeah.
Give me-
My name is Roy Crawford. I'm the interim superintendent of schools.
But actually, sorry,
Oh.
it's either sitting so that mic can pick you up there. Yeah, they're pretty
Okay.
sensitive for.
I
Appreciate
I was a
it.
teacher for a lot of years, so
Understand.
I'm not used to sitting and talking to people, you know, I'm used to being up and moving around. But anyway, I am the interim superintendent. I see some familiar faces here. And thank you for giving us some time on your agenda. It's important to us. We're committed to advancing our strategic plan, giving information about the school strategic plan. And so we welcome this opportunity. We're at Breckenridge this afternoon. We're going to go up to Blue River in a couple of weeks. So we thank you for your time because we know you're busy. And we'll keep it to 15 minutes. When I applied for this position and was looking online at the school district and documents and so on, this strategic plan really resonated with me. And I think it probably resonates with a lot of people who take the time to dig into it, understand it, and the implications that it has for the school district. And let me wait a second here. Are we okay?
We're getting close.
Getting close? I'll wait for the PowerPoint to come up. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself.
While we're waiting, I just say congratulations on what I'm hearing is a very successful start to the school year with all of the challenges you've been presented.
Well, thank you. It has been a challenge. And like it has for you folks too, I know. Hiring employees and buses and transportation, food service workers, all of those things have been a real challenge in combination with the COVID. And I'll just say, well, okay, we're up. But thank you for that, for the good word. Yeah.
I can.
You can do it, Mary
I
Kay?
can drive. Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
all right, good. And on this screen, and for me, one of the things that resonated was simply the vision that we prepare caring, courageous, community-minded people who create a better world. And those are just very simple concepts, but they really reflect the values of the school and what we envision for our children when they graduate and go on to become folks, our community leaders. And so if you want to go ahead, Mary Kay. Okay. And the next one maybe. All right. Now, my goal, and Mary Kay will give details about the strategic plan and the creation of it and how it's created because Mary Kay was involved in it from the get-go. And I really commend the district. This predates me, obviously, but I really commend the district for a year ago deciding to get down this route and really developing a quality strategic plan to guide the district. And it was a challenging year last year, as we all know, on a lot of different fronts for the school. But for them to have done that was just a brilliant piece of work. It was brilliant thinking to do it. And it's also a brilliant piece of work that they produced. And the strategic plan in terms of our thinking about it, that it's kind of our North Star. It's our guiding document that that drives the agenda of the board, the Board of Education, drives the agendas of our school leadership when the principals meet, when our instructional leaders meet, when our central office staff meet. Our focus is on the strategic plan, the way we organize our meetings and so on. The district advisory committee that advises the board, their work, our school advisory committees, our teachers and staff and so on. So it becomes our North Star. Not becomes, it is. And so at this point, Mary Kay, and again, she was one of the developers and worked hard at it and did a great job. We'll get into some of the details about how it was created, what the focuses of the strategic plan are, and then we'll talk a little bit about our next steps, and then we can respond to questions. So
Yep.
Mary Kay?
Perfect. I'm Mary Kay DeRay. I'm the Chief Academic Officer and did another little job there for a month in some transition before we welcomed Roy. So, but as Roy talked about, this is my 25th year with the school district. Seen a couple strategic plans before this one. I will say we did this one a little differently and with a little different intention. We were able to partner with CEI, which is Colorado Education Initiatives. You'll hear on the video Alex Carter talk a little bit about the process that we went through, but it allowed us to be participants. We didn't have to run it. We didn't have to do all the facilitation. It allowed the school district leadership, teachers, parents, and especially students to be participants in the process. We also did a lot of listening to our community. And we also dug into a lot of data, some of it good, some of it not so great, but really to inform where we wanted to go. And then the last piece was really hearing from our students. What do they want to leave us with after they get through Summit School District? So I'm going to say a little prayer that the video works.
It usually doesn't.
Oh, look at this, though. This is looking promising.
Looking good.
And then Roy says, Mary Kay, can you?
When we do
There
strategic
we go.
planning with school districts, we really try to follow a evidence-based process to get to great outcomes. And we think that the Cotter model, Dr. Jim Cotter, has a model for changing big change. And what we always try to do is start with what is the reason that we're trying to change? What is the impetus for new plans? And that impetus starts with a really bold outcome. And when we work with school districts, we help them design and develop a graduate profile. It's a statement, an audacious, aspirational statement for outcomes for students. And the graduate profile in Summit County kind of creates that sense of urgency. What are we changing to? What do we need to get better at if we can deliver upon those outcomes? The second thing we want to do is create a guiding coalition. And we did that through we did 14 community listening sessions in Summit County, including 4 with the Spanish-speaking community, to really find out what are the needs, what are the wants, what are the desires of the community for the district. And then we pulled together a steering committee, a representative steering committee with students and teachers and parents and community members and district administrators to kind of guide the development of the strategic plan. And that whole process ended up and resulted in a really high quality, aspirational, audacious strategic plan for Summit School District.
I think we came up with something that is a framework for everybody in the district. I think whether you're a student or a teacher or an administrator, you can look at the whole plan or just part of the plan and really focus on that, whether it's being a community member that's inclusive to everybody, or just taking one small piece of the graduate profile and really looking at that and focusing on that for that day or that week or that month.
I am thrilled by the process. I'm thrilled that we had so much community involvement and student voice, staff and teachers, leadership from the schools that were involved in putting this together. I'm excited to see how this rolls out. With the 3 pillars, I think that we really hit on the most important things for our kids. The teaching and learning and social emotional is what I would call pillar 1. Really looking at our systems to make sure that they are equity seeking, pillar number 2. And then number 3, it's very near and dear to my heart, is this community involvement and parent partnership piece. And I think maybe in Summit County specifically, or maybe I'm biased, but I think that is going to really support the work of our district and ultimately be a huge win for our kids.
When thinking about the strategic plan process, one word that really sticks out is collaboration. From the listening tours to working with all the different schools and taking consideration of our unique community and all the strengths, the needs, and the opportunities that take place here. And this is not just one person's plan sitting behind a desk saying, here we go. Let's go do it. It's been built from the ground up and collaboratively explored and put into place. The exciting part is the work that needs to be done.
We're going to do some work as a staff to understand the strategic plan and the parts and what we want to develop with our students. And then we're going to empower teachers to go back into their classrooms to work with the students. And there was student voice in creating the plan, so it should be meaningful to them as well, because it wasn't created just by adults to tell kids how they should be, but had student voice in the creation. So yes, throughout K-12, we will be working this year to familiarize everybody with the plan and what it looks like. And then district with teachers, working on training so that we understand how to implement these practices.
A lot of times people will ask me, what do we do next? Well, you do the next 3 steps in the Cotter model. The first one is we're going to go out and tell people about the strategic plan and reorient people to where we're going as a district. That's really bringing people in so that they have co-ownership and really buy into this plan and see how they can help deliver upon the promise of the plan. Then you're going to, as a district, identify what are the things that stand between us and the eventual outcomes of this plan. And we're going to remove barriers where possible to enable more profound action. And finally, we're going to try to generate some wins right now, some short-term small wins to let people know this is possible. And we can do this together. So that's what we're trying to do this year, get people to get really familiar with the plan, get people to buy into what they're going to need to do in order to get to that plan, and then generate some short-term wins.
See if I can get, oh, how do I get back?
Now get the PowerPoint back.
Oh, I know, this is really tough. Nope. Oh, there we go. Look at that. So this is a little bit of a roadmap. As Roy mentioned, and as you heard Alex talk about, we started out in December trying to recruit our steering committee. Those were some of the folks who were on our steering committee. And we worked all the way up until May and June when we had this skeleton product that we then shared with the school board. And now, as Roy and I say, we're on our information tour going around and sharing with the community, because that's important. It's not just, it's the school district's plan, but it's the school district's plan for the community. And that's why we need to share it, be transparent, and make sure that we're sharing it with our larger learning community. As you saw, Kate Hudnut, our school board president, had this was her part that she was talking about in the video. We've come with 3 main focus areas. The first one, academic and personal success for every student. That's not only academics, but also their social emotional development. Focus area 2 being an equity seeking system, because we know that kids don't all need the same thing. We have to make sure that we're providing what they need. And then focus area 3, really making sure that we in this great community that we all live in, we're also tapping into our families and our community partners and making sure that we're all supporting our kids. And this is the graduate profile, which you heard Alex talk about, that audacious statement. This was one of the most powerful things I think we had during the steering committee. We had students from Snowy Peaks and also from Summit High School come and join us. And CEI said, in their infinite wisdom, facilitating, said, no adults can talk. No adults are presenting. The adults can talk and come up with things, but the kids need to present this and need to really speak into it. So we had a really powerful evening with kids talking to us about what do they want to leave Summit School District with. We came upon these 5 different attributes, as you can see: courageous, globally aware, growth-oriented, prepared, and curious. And we've been trying to make this a living, breathing document. We had t-shirts made up for every staff member before school started. So we're really trying to see, how do we continue to live these attributes, not only the students, but also the adults in our learning community. So that's our plan. And we come to you to share this because soon we're going to be asking for volunteers to help us on different committees as we start to do the work. This was work, but now we're in the important phase of really trying to, as you guys know, any plan is only as good as it's on paper until you really start to infuse it into your daily work and start to measure what happens. And that's where we're at right now, talking about our committees that will form from the strategic
I'm going
plan.
to go back to this. If you can go back, Mary Kay, to
This one?
the 3 focus areas. So again, when we're structuring school board meetings, when we're structuring our leadership meetings, et cetera, we're focusing on those 3 focus areas. Our agendas are our research and so on. Under each of those, as we flesh this whole thing out, under each of those, there will be probably 2 or 3 so-called subcommittees where we'll actually develop the action plans on what we intend to do, what specifically it looks like, what the timeline is, who is responsible, and how we measure success. So that's when we get into the nitty-gritty of the work, and not to be, it's work that adults are doing, but it really needs to be focused on how ultimately these notions actually find their way to children in their classrooms every day, and how it impacts their success at school, how it impacts their experience. So now the real work begins in putting those action plans together and implementing them and measuring our success in working with the kids. So that's where we are. And so we're in that first phase, and we just want more people to know what we're doing, et cetera, et cetera. So are there questions that you might have? Or, and again, I know this is a 35,000-foot view of the whole thing. Or any other questions you have, if they're not about the plan.
As a father of a 9-year-old, and I appreciate this. This is great. I think all of these parents would love to know this of their school board and all that, because this gives a better defined, vision to where parents are generally out on their own, right? And especially COVID really made that apparent where parents were on their own, but this is good stuff.
And our challenge is, I appreciate the comment, and if you have any advice as a parent, because our challenge is, we can go to parent teacher organizations, et cetera, and present to people, which we're doing, okay, to reach parents, but it reaches a segment of parents who are available at that time of day, et cetera. So we're always open to suggestions on how we can access more parents, which is a challenge. People are busy and so on. So if you've got any suggestions, we'd love to hear it in terms of accessing more. Yeah.
I would say social media campaign based around, whoever has their kids in the education system. I think that would be one thing. I'm sure all of the schools have email lists of all of the parents. You could almost email maybe a one-pager of this stuff around and, be actively looking for input from parents, because that's a crossover. That's an area that you got to bridge that divide. Right? I think most parents would like to hear that. And so that would be, that's a couple suggestions.
Yep.
Obviously, within each school and within each classroom, kids can come home with different information, right? And that is a thing as well, where, they bring a folder home every day of their own stuff. And, even the 3 priorities might be nice to just see at the kitchen table, right?
Yeah,
when you pull that out.
We're working on a 1-2 pager, trying to really condense it into an easily understandable.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
I got a question. I guess, because I was looking through this, and I've got a middle school and high school, and, Amy alluded to this, and we all have perspective of the challenges of the school district from our own perspective. I don't often break out and really think of it operationally. When I saw this, I guess the first thing was, great, new strategic plan, but what, can you highlight a couple salient areas that really kind of compelled you to say, wow, we're failing the kids thus. We need a new strategic plan. What are you looking to immediately just help me understand that you hope to be what would be an example of change the outcome, for example, say, oh, because of this, we would expect this outcome to never happen.
So I'll share a little bit, only because I was here and Roy wasn't. So our old strategic plan, we'll see if anybody really heard what it was. It was called Vision 2020. And then we had Vision 2020 version 2. So obviously 2020 came up and we can no longer have a strategic plan that was Vision 2020. But I mean, I joke about that, but at the same time, that strategic plan wasn't as comprehensive. Also didn't, when Doug Blake, the assistant principal at the high school, talked about this, wasn't just one person behind a desk making up this plan. Not to talk ill of the past, but we maybe had a strategic plan that was just a few people who put that together. This one really, the difference was listening to the community and listening to our students and hearing what the difference is. And what we're hoping when Roy talks about that North Star, it's really talking about our business is academics and social emotional development. How do we make sure that kids are in a safe, welcoming environment? They feel safe to be who they are, all those things, as well as getting that education with what they need. We know our gifted and talented students need something different than our second language learners. And when you talk about trying to operationalize 24 different kids in one class and trying to figure out what they all need, it's a challenge a lot of times. So I think what it's going to help us do as we dive deeper into this work is to have that goal in front of us, have the strategic initiatives that address that goal and measure it and really look for that growth. Look to see if what we thought was going to make the difference is making the difference. And that's where I think we're going to see that systemic change and that progress is when we hold ourselves accountable, measure things. If it didn't work, we say, okay, that didn't work. What are we doing next? But we're really honest and forthright and have a plan. And the plan isn't just one thing over here, one thing over there. It's really talking about how are we making sure what you guys didn't see in this in the academic growth goal, we talked about every student making a year's achievement, making a year's growth in a year's time. That's a pretty burly goal for all kids across the board. Of course, these work groups will dive into that and they'll massage that and tweak that a little bit, but that's a goal that our committee said, how can we not say that we want all kids to make a year's growth in a year's time? How can we have the bar be any lower? So I think some of those really goals that we're putting out there and figuring out how do we systematize that is the thing that hopefully will make the difference.
And I would say the same thing, but a little bit differently. And that is, I've got fresh eyes on the district. You know, I've got a fresh perspective. I don't have history. So I'm maybe a little bit more objective. And I think the data would show, when Mary Kay said earlier, looking into student data and assessment scores and how much growth kids do make in a year's time. I think as our district, we have pockets of excellence. And we have pockets of excellence for some kids, but it's not systemic excellence for all kids. And so in a very general way, that's the way I would respond to that. And from my point of view, the strategic plan gives the structure to systematize and make sustainable all kids all the time. Okay. And so I know those are general kinds of statements, but that's the way I see the function of a strategic plan. That again, it's not pockets, it's not some, it's all the time, and create the systems to make that work.
You know, and plans are great, but without people execute them, how does this help you attract and retain educational talent that aren't just moving themselves?
Yeah. From my point of view, like if I see myself as an example, I'd like to think, especially at a leadership level and also at the teacher level, people, I believe, aspire to work in organizations that are at some level inspirational, where there's a vision, where there's a pathway to that vision, where they know that their contributions are going to be not respected, but there'll be benefit to their work, that they see that there's a means to an end. And the research that I've seen lately about migration of teachers and migration of employees in general, it's about money, but it's much more about job satisfaction. It's about knowing you make a difference, you know, those kinds of things. And I'd like to think that when you think systemically and and people speak with one voice and have a common goal and a common vision, that's the kind of organization people want to work for, at least in my experience. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but that's where I would be with that.
No, Doug, I just kind of want to hear that question. There's some parts there that are critical that aren't line items in the plan. There's the people component that's a little less tangible. Ability to track and execute.
Yeah.
People who interface with children. That have systemic support throughout.
And that's a good point.
And
Yeah.
we shared it. I mean, when we did this, you saw the same presentation that we shared with all the staff before school started, and that was facilities, that was bus drivers, that was kitchen folks, that was teaching staff, that was our administrators. It was everyone, because everyone plays that role, you know, and being part of an organization, like Roy said, that has that feeling and has that common message and that value-driven, this is what we're about and this is what we're for. And I think, you know, a lot of times we can't rely on housing prices anymore. Those are too crazy, but we've relied on people wanting to come and live in Summit. That has been our biggest recruiting strategy. People just want to be here. But I think with a plan like this and with having that really be part of the work we do, I think they'll want to come to Summit also because of what we do as a district.
But your point's well taken, though, that the component of ability to attract and retain. Yeah.
Really appreciate it. So,
Yeah, we'll
when
be.
you take that next step, and I think this is the first big step, and we've got 3 of your schools in our town. We have more schools than any other town, so we're proud of that, and we appreciate everything you've done so far. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Snowy Peaks,
Snowy Peaks.
the middle school, the high school in Frisco.
The high school is kind of
Oh, high school, you don't
Yeah.
claim them? Okay. All right. Okay, okay.
And we do thank you for your time. We know you're
Yeah.
busy and you got a lot going on. So we appreciate you carving out a bit of time for us.
And you
Thanks.
didn't grill us about short-term rentals like. Thank you.
That's okay. Thanks a lot. Take care. Good to see you, Tony.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting for the Frisco Town Council. May I have the roll call, please?
Certainly. Mortensen. Aronson. Burley, absent. Fallon. Held. Incan. Sherburne.
Here.
Next up this evening, we'll do public comment. Anyone wishing to make public comment may do so now. Please be topic specific for anything that is not on this evening's agenda. State your name and address for the record and keep your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. Yeah, just kind of turn the volume up to 11.
Okay. Well, I've turned in the housing petition with a total of 440 signatures, and it's currently under review. If 393 signatures hold up, Frisco residents will have an opportunity to be included in the decision-making process by voting on whether or not to implement this ordinance. Mary Waldman is the leader of opposition, and her hypocrisy is outright hysterical. Right now, she's in Breckenridge arguing that their council should not be implementing STR regulation without their constituents' approval. At the same time, here in Frisco, she is challenging a petition intended to give people a voice and offer an objective metric of the community's will on a specific ordinance. I applaud her total devotion to personal interests and willingness to act without shame. It's truly an expression of mainstream American ideology. I'm confident 393 signatures will hold up and the petition will pass review. The entire process has been a learning experience greater than I could have imagined 2 months ago. Listening and interacting with so many people brought knowledge and empathy into my life in a meaningful way, and I'm grateful to everyone that spent their time engaging. Sorry, it's a little tough to breathe. The primary lesson learned was that other than a few people with extreme beliefs, a few people called me a communist, and a few people think all second homeowners are evil. But other than those extremes, most people are nice, reasonable, and willing to listen and discuss the topic in a considerate way with an open mind. They have a wide range of opinions, and together it forms a full spectrum of thought that council cannot replicate. Most of the people in this community are more successful, more professional, have more invested, and are just generally smarter than myself. Put me in a room alone with any one of these people, and I'm likely to agree with their perspective because their ideas seem reasonable and well thought. Then you put me in a room with someone else who has opposing views that are also reasonable and well thought, and I'm likely to change my mind. Regardless of media rhetoric, our community understands we need to come together in meaningful discussions about the rapid proliferation of short-term rental technology. Frisco residents are smart enough to make a thoughtful decision with foresight and consideration of the dynamic variables making our community unique. We can trust the people to create a healthy community that is functional and sustainable. The STR discussion is part of a national zeitgeist and is larger than the town of Frisco. Everyone in our community deserves a voice and an opportunity to participate in the decision-making process around an issue of this magnitude. Frisco locals know what's best for themselves, their families, and their community. They will get to vote and form a majority consensus regarding the efficacy and implementation of this ordinance. I trust voters to make an educated decision that will benefit the community as a whole. The vast majority of Frisco residents are smart, successful people who have considerate opinions and reasonable ideas. Many of the people I engaged with in conversation were second homeowners without voting rights. I found them to be more supportive than oppositional towards the idea of a vote on this ordinance. The reoccurring theme connecting their stories was a common reason for choosing to purchase in Frisco. The reason being they love the character and culture of our town. They specifically chose to purchase here because we have a strong and inspiring local community. Frisco has its own identity separate from Summit County. I would ask someone in Frisco, do you live here? And they would reply, yeah. And then I'd ask if they're a registered voter here, to which they say, no, I live in Silverthorne or in Breck. Often people living in neighboring communities consider themselves Summit County residents. Conversely, if you ask Frisco residents in Breckenridge if they live there, the answer is an emphatic no. I live in Frisco. The response conveys a core reason people to choose Frisco for their home or investment. Our town has a wholesome vibe that's tangibly different from everywhere else in Summit County. Second, homeowners who were not supportive mainly pointed to a fear of decreased home values as their primary concern. They perceive their investment as being dollars and cents associated with the hard asset rather than an investment in the community as a whole. A vibrant, healthy, and functional community will only make our town more desirable and increase property value. A large part of what makes Frisco great is the people. I hope second homeowners can allow this process to run its course and accept the results. The community will be what its residents decide. I believe this ordinance will improve quality of life for Frisco's long-term residents. At least 17% of voters agree and should discuss and vote on meaningful legislation. My mind is open and my perspective may change after listening to others' thoughts and opinions, but I firmly believe this decision should be made by voters. It's unfair to place the onus of such a heated and controversial topic on 6 council members. After voting, regardless of outcome, we can all move forward knowing the community's voice was heard and majority consensus prevailed. Furthermore, since BBQ Fest is tonight's topic of discussion, I believe council should offer the community a chance to vote on this issue too. Let the people decide. I love the BBQ Fest. It's the best meal of the year, and I think most people agree it should return to Frisco. But maybe I'm wrong, and the majority of residents are not like-minded in my thinking. Let's have a vote so there's an objective measure and let majority consensus prevail. It is arrogant to think that a small council with half of its members uncontested can make a better decision than the consensus of a community.
Online and wish to speak, please raise your hand. You're welcome.
Seeing no additional public comment, no one's hands raised online. But at this time, I'll close public comment and move on to mayor and council comments. Comments this evening, folks. Melissa, any comments? No, all right. Yeah, please, Andrew.
Until you went into the 4th and 5th minute, I want to compliment Ace. The lack of respect for the rules of 3 minutes almost makes me not want to say this, but your passion, your commitment to the topic that you find critically important is admirable and appreciated, and that's regardless of how the count of the petition goes or if it gets to a vote, how the vote goes. But I just want to publicly compliment you for what you've done this past couple months because you think it's an important and right. Thank you.
I would say just in council comments, and for myself, I think especially seeing the presentation from the school board, I'm gonna give another plug. Please reach out to the town manager. We need to update and have a retreat and look at our strategic plan, get that up to date. It is part of the responsibility we've all taken on in running for and being elected to these seats. And we owe it to this town that we do take the time to make that happen. It is an important part of the process. I am just as busy as the rest of you. I get it, but we owe that to the job and to the people we serve. So please reach out to Tony. We will put it on work session if need be, and that will then probably get into other time that we should be spent doing other things. But we need to have this conversation and review, update, and make sure that we're all working towards the common good. And I think the strategic plan presentation we saw from the school board shows why it's so important to revisit those and hone those and keep those as in our earlier discussion, that we can address all the discussions and conversations and choices we make with clarity through that. So I implore council to do that, and I appreciate it. And on a second note, I want to thank everyone from the entire community who rallied down to Silverthorne yesterday to attack that fire. I think for those who don't know how much of a community effort it is, it goes from our own communication staff to our PD, our fire departments throughout the entire county. I hope that the weather this evening has brought needed snow and rain and put that out. And I also want to thank Councilmember Held for championing our own local fire forests in the fire world and getting that on our budget discussions for next year. And hopefully we can combat that before we have to fight it. So thank you, and thanks to all the folks who did what they did to protect Silverthorne and our friends down there to the north. And
One comment real quick,
please.
sorry, and since I see him sitting there in the back of the room, and I know Bill is leaving us. I'm not sure, I might be pretty sure, I'm not sure, I can't remember the exact date, Bill, you're leaving, but, you know, part of the turnover on senior staff, and it's a great opportunity to welcome some new staff members, and excited to work with some new faces, but Bill, you, at least from this council member's perspective, so yes, I've always appreciated your reports and your perspectives, your institutional knowledge of this town and codes. Been a great guide throughout. So, yes, I wish you the best of success. Yeah, not sure when you're leaving. I have some time to thank you again next week.
thank you, council. Tony, any additional staff updates at this time? Then moving on to, we have a proclamation this evening. I think kind of in light of where Councilmember Fallon just started was a segue. Fall is obviously the season of change, and we're facing that here with staff, and we see that. And I think the key thing that we know when fall is coming is because our beautiful landscape turns gold with the beauty of the trees. And for the town and for our finance department, I think we have had gold on display for the last 14 years with Bonnie Monet and all she brings. But in the spirit of fall and the spirit of change, it is why we're taking this moment as the town of Frisco to have a proclamation for Bonnie Monet Day. Whereas Bonnie Monet has been the town of Frisco's finance director since April 2007, and whereas under Bonnie's leadership, the town of Frisco has earned the following awards from the Government Finance Officers Association: the Certificate for Achievement for the Excellence in Financial Reporting every year since 2008, the Award for Outstanding Achievement in Popular Annual Financial Reporting every year since 2009, and the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award every year since 2009. And whereas Bonnie has ushered the town through some of the town's most complex, noteworthy projects requiring significant financial resources and negotiations, including the Frisco Adventure Park development, the Step Up Main Street project, the Base Camp project, and the ongoing Marina Improvement project. And whereas Bonnie has worked on 15 town of Frisco budgets through the Great Recession, into the recovery, and through the COVID-19 pandemic without compromising core services for the Frisco residents. And whereas Bonnie's intelligence, integrity, professionalism, sense of humor, humility, and kindness have inspired us all and made the town of Frisco a better place to work and to live. And whereas Bonnie's Bassets, Mickey and Babe, who've joined us this evening, have stolen hearts, distributed drool throughout the town of Frisco, and distracted us all from the woes of the past 13 months. And whereas Bonnie's last day at the town of Frisco will be October 1st, 2021. And whereas we wish Bonnie all the best as she embraces her love of travel and sets out on an epic road trip in her van with her two trusty Bassets. And whereas Frisco Town Council offers our deepest gratitude to the dedicated professionalism for her exceptional service to this community over the past 14 years. And now, therefore, September 28th, 2021 is hereby declared Bonnie Monet Day in Frisco, Colorado, dated this, the 28th day of September, 2021. Thank you, Bonnie.
Yay, Bonnie! Woo!
Thank you so much. I am nothing without all of you. It does take a village, and we've had great teams, great councils. It's been my honor to work here. I love this town. I love the people. I love the community. It is the a fabulous place. It has truly been my pleasure, and thank you so very much. I will miss you all dearly with all my heart, but I will be back. And with the best.
Bonnie did not want any gifts, so this is anyone's end, so this is Dan's size appreciation.
I'm so excited. No idea.
Those who didn't hear online, she said she's not leaving. And I made it through without crying, so I appreciate that as well. Bonnie, thank you so much for all you have ever done for us. Next this evening is the consent agenda. Motion. Been approved, moved to approve by Councilmember Fallon. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Aronson. Discussion on motion. Seeing none, can you call the question, please?
Certainly. Aronson.
Yes.
Burley, absent. Fallon. Held. Incan.
Yes.
Sherburne.
Yes.
Martinson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next is new business in this agenda item number 1. This is a continued workforce housing discussion and follow-up. I'll open up the public hearing and turn it over to staff and
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Good to see everybody in person again. At the September 14th work session, we discussed various housing strategies that focused on a variety of specific projects, programs, including various funding opportunities, which staff believes will have the most impact in Frisco. The staff memo in your packet tonight is a summarization of those strategies that were discussed. Each opportunity could be its own topic at a future work session meeting potentially, which would allow staff additional time for a more in-depth analysis, including what has worked, what hasn't, learning from others' mistakes, and also successes. Based on council's feedback, we prioritized in our staff report tonight those items into a short-term, mid-term, and really long-term projected goals for you. Based on council's feedback tonight, we're hoping to seek confirmation of that from what we discussed at the last work session.
you want to run through each line or how would you hope to?
That's kind of what I was going to seek from council's perspective. If there was something that you thought, you might want to adjust or want to discuss further. I know there were a couple items that we may not have gotten to towards the end of the last meeting, mostly around the funding opportunities. But we could certainly look at the development opportunities and partnerships, probably more in particular, maybe 275 Granite Street. I think we got very clear direction on some of the other development options there, if we wanted to start with that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Does that sound good there?
Staff report to finance.
So I think where we left that at the last work session was council expressed interest in selling this property with further consideration needed to determine what encumbrances, such as workforce housing requirements, would be placed on the property through a covenant or as part of a purchase and sale agreement. That's sort of what we discussed.
And again, that's for reference what we in the past we're calling the Sabatini lot.
Yes, also known as the Sabatini lot.
It's the true title, so. Yeah, I think to pick up a little bit where we left off, and I know I was one of the few who said it, that I was always very hesitant in the past to think about selling that, knowing that where it is, how flat it is, how developable that parcel is. But I think in light of some offers we've had, some conversations we had with the neighboring property and the scope of that lot being better served this community as a bigger picture with its adjoining lot and the work that's being done on the workforce housing or workforce center on the other side of town. I think it'd be still kind of entertaining, see what it takes to go there. I would definitely want to have some sort of focus on, a heavier toll of workforce housing and or if we can push it, and I don't know how that would look in the bigger picture, that focus on rentals. And I know that's where the biggest hole is in the market right now. And if there's a way for a set amount of time, a period of time, and I look to like Councilmember Sherburne with her experience in development and living this in a better way. But I think, you know, we need to find a way to fill that rental gap. And if we can subsidize more rentals through, you know, potentially a more affordable price on that lot, I would be in support of that to find good balance in whatever way that works. I'd kick off the conversation with that or hear other ideas.
You know, I go back to the work that we did earlier with evaluating the potential in that primary. It really was exciting, and the potential I think is still there. I think there's significant money to do that. Kind of the workforce potential that is in that lot, you know, really exploit it from the development side, all the ways that it can be done. I do think that if those two houses are developed in 10 yards, we could a lot. So, so in terms of aggressively pursuing, you know, developing that whole space to the community's benefit, I think it does behoove us to shop it and see if, you know, that partnership evolves. You know, if not, then I think we can come back. I was really excited, and I totally speak to this when we talked about the incoming finance director and actually the ability to develop a participation on workforce development on the development itself. And if that has to do with the amount of equity that's in the partial start, in other words, owning that dirt at 275, does that make that, from a development perspective, then if you don't find that partnership, you can come right back around without, you know, again, these 5 new funds that we have are very, very limited. And I think if we aggressively pursue some buyout options, a lot of that money should be wrapped up there. So I think identifying those other funding mechanisms, those financing mechanisms like that, take that parcel, take it, turn around, and really get something coming out of it. Then, then good enough. I think overall, I think going back to that partnership model on that lot makes so much sense. Make sure that that is explored and not going to happen. I would say that being the new kind of the new ideal, something to look at. I think it's going to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
So that being last resort, and then only if it looks like that cash is going to be directly translated, or it's make the web channel get that over the hump. It's cash that has to come. And I'm going too far ahead of it. Intimating that that's what we're doing. But anyway, but you know, in terms of making sure we understand the best way to leverage the funds that we have and the financing mechanisms that we have. Look at this with cash flows. That's right. I'm curious to hear more about that. See if we can apply that a lot.
Well, certainly, as we illustrated, the mental center is a tremendous way to leverage existing resources, because you have one-time historic low interest rates, which have gone on far longer than I think I or anyone else expected that will inevitably change. Taking advantage of that, coupled with rising construction costs, you know, if you can get something in the ground today versus 3 or 4 years from now, that can represent a 30 to 40% difference right there. So when you can use a dedicated source of income, that's the key. I don't think that the financing institutions are going to use the collateral of the land as much as the revenue stream from
your existing transfer tax. In the discussion tonight, was asking maybe rethink if you want to earmark keep that transfer tax. You already got the 5A money. And if you go forward with some form of, whether it's a fee, talking to that, is a good concept, or an excise tax on short-term rentals, you now have a fairly substantial stream of revenue to amortize, to be able to fund and leverage the property. Another, Vail's done it, Breckenridge is doing it, it's a smart move. You don't want to use all your revenue stream dedicated to that debt service, but certainly a chunk of it to accelerate the delivery of product today versus 5 years from now. Because at the rate things are going, it's getting crazy. That's the beauty of it. Great day.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Thanks, Hunter. I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you guys. So Dan, if you already said this, I apologize. I caught little bits and pieces of it. Specifically to 275, I think that it would benefit us if we began to define the outcome that we want. And Hunter, you sort of framed it up in terms that, we've talked about over the years, and I think it's leading in that direction. Is it rental? Do we want to own it? What is that perfect scenario? And I think we as a council can begin to do that, define really not only the objective, but what is the outcome that we're hoping for? Do we want to be a partner? Do we want to just hand it off? And then start defining the tools that are available to us. Obviously, there's a huge spectrum of tools. And so the one that I heard at the last meeting that seemed to have a lot of merit for this one is having some sort of deed restriction on that property. But in addition to that deed restriction, what are the 5 or 10 other tools that we can use? And how many of those tools do we want to throw at this property? And so I think one challenge that we've always had in making decisions about housing is, what do we really want to do? What tools do we want to employ? And one thing that we may want to do is really just hone in on that outcome and then take a step back and allow Eva and Don and Tony and others to help us really understand the tools that can help us get to that outcome in the linkage from the tool to that outcome. Otherwise, it's difficult for the 7 of us to make a really clear decision on this. So that would be my suggestion on 275. What is the end result that we're aiming towards? And then what are the tools to get there?
That's okay. Thank you, Melissa. I agree. And the key there is what's the outcome? We should not be deciding right now, let's sell it. Because we don't know, right? We don't know what the outcome is to be. But I would like to say and bring it back to the funding model, right? If we are needing to sell it because we need X amount out of it to put into what, then, what is our ask when we go to Washington, to ask for funding, right? So this goes into it, do we need to sell this? Not necessarily, right? I think it was just identified by us as sort of an outlier compared to the rest of the properties we own, as this could be a potential, right? But I don't think by any means we have, the figures to determine whether or not, we should be selling this property right at this moment. I do agree in that, the potential partnership with Mr. Glassman, because he owns that other piece, it was an exciting prospect at the time when it came through. There were a lot of particulars that just didn't work out. There should be a way to be able to work out a deal here, and potentially we end up keeping it. The town owning property, I don't see the long-term benefit of just selling it right away unless we're able to, to get the outcome that we want, be that rental units or deed restrictions or whatever. But yeah, I think, this still is going to take some more research. And I think we need to, as far as the outcome, we need to really identify what is the number that we need to come to in order to determine that we're putting money into Lake Hill, or we're putting money into the next housing unit, or whatever. We're obviously short out of our budget many millions to this end, right? So what is that many millions? That, what's even the pie in the sky kind of thing? If we had 10 million to work with, would that be, what we want? If we were going to sell that piece for 2 million or 1.5 million or something, is that going to change the outcome, right? For what we have. I feel like if we sell this piece without doing all of our due diligence, that we would end up missing out, because that 1 or 2 million that we get is just not going to be enough to do something, that we really want to do with it. So I think as far that goes right back to the outcome, and we really need to define, what it is that we're looking for, that we're looking to do, that we need.
And I think just to clarify, I think not necessarily misspoke, but I think like the better way to look at my perspective on that lot is like, we need to put it more in play now. To everything you said, let's see what we can get, what people are willing to do, and evaluate it that way. But for me, I think it goes back to my end goal with that is I think that's a spot where rentals and density would be huge. I think whatever that conversation looks like with whether it's Mr. Glassman or another developer who might go do the whole block, but.
Andrew?
Other
Way I would
direction, thoughts
say,
on that?
this is how I say it, what I think you guys are all getting to is that, to pull from everyone, that piece of land develops better as one unit. Now, I really like Melissa's idea. We spoke a few weeks ago about, we needed to define, we need to find what we're looking for. And in that, what does that look like with a deed restricted, with density bonus and rental, if that's where we're at as a team? And bring that forward to the interested parties and see where it goes. And that could look like, in the sale agreement, this is what it's going to look like. We take the money and we invest it in another piece of property. The one we're looking at on the other side of town, coming from the state, would be somewhere that I would be interested in, again, as another opportunity, and then have the hopefully future 5A funds be able to go over there or Lake Hill. It's just one little piece. But I think between Dan and Andy and Melissa, it's better as one project. We don't want to miss an opportunity and define our outcome. And I think I really like that for our strategic goals as we move forward. Let's put measurable things in there when we get to our retreat.
No, I appreciate that.
I think primarily I need to chop off a couple of my hands, because I got on one hand and on the other hand, and then I got another hand. And, to me, the property is worth somewhere between negative and about $3 million. Because if we sell it at the market rate, it might be worth $3 million. If we deed restrict the hell out of it, it might be worth negative. We have to let the developer have it and pay for the developer to put up the subsidized project. So I disagree that it's all that much better combined. We walk down that path, maybe from design, symmetry, stuff like that. But if we want to build 22 units on half and 22, or you combine it and you get 44 units, I'm not sure the importance of that. I would love to have made a deal with Mr. Glassman, but it didn't work out in what they were proposing. So in order to have a partnership, you have to have willing partners. If we don't go there, I don't see that as a big deal. Another concept in is we started a year ago with two big projects, CDOT and this. We still have two big projects without this. So how many big projects do we want, and how many can we afford? Is another hand of the conversation. So I'm not in a hurry. I can make the argument that we should sell this at top dollar and utilize it to build the other two major projects. I can make the argument that we should subsidize it and give it away. So, which probably that summarizes where we are. You know, one other thing is we can go get an appraisal on it. I mean, we can conversationally know what it's worth, but we're developing a property down the street that's a little bit bigger or smaller, but I don't know. Just I'm not in a hurry. We have 2 active projects. If the Workforce Center project continues with the momentum we seem to think it has, I'm not in a hurry on this at all, because we may need the money, and I'd hate to not have it available to us to do the other 2 higher priority projects, because this is still a great location for a market rate project. I know there's like an allergy to market rate, but that does generate the most dollars for us. So that has to stay in the conversation.
Well, I think
How's that helpful for summarizing?
No, but I think that's the the synergy of the partnership is that from an outcome perspective, I think we know what we want. We know we want rental units out of that. And I think, you know, we could certainly do that ourselves. You know, there's a number of mechanisms that have already been identified that allow us to do that. We could do that right away. We went over this in 2017 on the task force, and we identified that, you know, the most imminently developable properties that we had, because there was no partnership necessarily involved. And the beauty of 275, of course, is that if we just move forward with some kind of RFP to develop rental units there, we just do it, and we don't have to wait for other partners and negotiation stances. And I think the Galena Street Workforce property is going to take a while. I mean, and I think in terms of stuff that we can do right away, I think we can identify a couple of things that we want to do with 275 that are pretty easy. One is we just let it be known that we're looking for a development partner, and we want rental units out of whatever rental units that our stake would deliver. That's what we're interested in. And there's some other, we can revisit that, and I think it would be easy to do, and there may or may not be interest. If there's not interest, I think it's pretty clear at that point that if that's the one that we can do reasonably in a reasonable amount of time, I think we put an RFP for a rental development and see where it goes, you know, and see what ideas people have. But, you know, we've had this conversation about this property for a couple of years, and I don't want to keep circling back to not in a hurry to do it, because I think, I don't want to say I'm in a hurry to do it, but I certainly feel an acute sense of urgency about utilizing this. You know, we're sitting on this, and there's this incredible need in the community. We know what it is. We've got pretty much the tools at our disposal to do it. And I think we just need to look at the most, again, partnership thing. And as soon as that is off the table, then I think we need to move forward with starting a development on that lot.
Well, we tried it.
I agree with that. And I think that we keep circling around and circling around with all of these options. We really need to understand. So if we do this to that lot, it will facilitate that. And we sort of know what that is. We want workforce rental units on that lot. I don't know if it needs to be a singular development with the neighbor. There were certainly benefits to that, but as some of you have pointed out, that ship may have sailed. Certainly what it was before, and is if there's a future for that, who knows? So I think we do need to look at it as a standalone lot, but we need to say, if we put this deed restriction on this lot, it will lead to Z, right? And if we don't start formulating those paths, we're going to keep having this circular discussion. And I really, really feel like it's our responsibility to move this conversation forward to that for that property. It's been in discussion for what seems like 10 years, and it's in the heart of our community. It's a prominent location. It would be incredible for market homes, but that's also why it would be absolutely incredible for workforce homes. So I'd like us to move this forward. I look to Eva and Don to lay out those solutions, define the tools and what outcomes each tool would lead to. And if I'm happy to discuss that further offline with Tony. You guys know I like to see things in matrices, really helping us kind of formulate our decisions, because we can talk endlessly about this stuff. So that's what I would like to see for 275.
Kind of direction.
What are you guys?
Is that kind of direction?
Are you asking?
No, I'm asking
Oh,
Eva.
okay.
Sorry, Melissa.
I mean, we certainly had gotten that direction earlier this year. You know, I had drafted an RFP. We just never put it out there yet because I don't think we really, as staff, had clear direction of what the outcome that council wanted for that parcel.
Sure.
So that being said, we can certainly, you know, put something more together that we could do that.
Do both. You could submit an RFP for a deed restricted rentals and then for open market, and then you can make a choice. Look at all your possibilities. They're not mutually exclusive.
But if you put out an RFP before, for example, the idea of the deed restriction seems to be getting legs. If you put out an RFP before we as council put a policy, a policy decision over that property, it greatly affects what we'll get out of the RFP. And so if you put the RFP out now versus in 6 months, when we put another mechanism on top of that or instrument on top of that property, we're going to have wildly different proposals. And so I'm not suggesting that we just jump forward with an RFP right now. I think we need to formulate what we're doing with the property to set up a process for success to get what we want. So I don't think it's the right time to put out an RFP.
Do you think putting an RFP out, Melissa, for development for rental complex is not an end goal that we share? Like, I think to me, that's what the proposal is we want rentals. We have this lot. What can they bring, knowing the tools that we've discussed and other things we already have in place? I guess I just don't see, I miss the disconnect there.
Well, we haven't decided what we're putting into it. So you know, if a developer puts forth ideas for, are we giving them the land? Are we subsidizing certain fees? Are we placing a deed restriction on the property itself that decreases the value, as Andrew has pointed out? All of these things, we haven't decided these things. And these are key metrics for any developer that would be putting forth ideas as to how they could actually develop the property. And so I think we're jumping the gun by putting out an RFP it definitely would elicit responses. And that's one way to go. But again, I don't know that we've had a fully baked conversation about what it is that we're after on that property. And are there things that we can do to really sort of set the foundation for getting what we want there? And I think we're not far off on that. I think it's 1 or 2 more meetings, but just putting out a RFP at this point would lead us to pretty much the same, a very similar outcome as was defined by the housing working group 3 or 4 years ago. And, is that exactly what we want now? And I'm not exactly sure. And so
we can just lay out for you and bring it back in the next meeting or two, the different options you can look at. What are the pros and cons of each? And then, as Melissa's saying, then really get down to which of those outcomes is the most desirable. And that will give us the direction we need for an RFP that's consistent with your policy direction.
I just want to stay focused on this property then, so, in terms of, the staff report, and we're looking at all these options, we know, everything has its own independent trajectory right now. And the one we have complete control over is Granite Street. Everything else is really, it's meetings with other groups, it's things. So, I really want to hone in on this. And, I'd say within the next 2 meetings, Melissa, answer those questions, because it seems like we can knock those down pretty quick in terms of what we need with just a little bit of background, a little bit of information. I don't know. I would like to make one last effort in terms of, I don't want to belabor the process again, but I think I would like to make sure that in terms of partnership consideration, that there is no interest. I don't think it hurts to reach out right now to see
If there is some interest, again, we invested a lot of time into that and got nowhere. I don't want to go down that road again. I would imagine nor does that person. So, maybe we can ask and answer that right now among ourselves. Is that something we want to do or not do? And if we don't want to do it, then great, cross it off the list and let's move on to what we need to do to work towards developing the outcome that we want there, which is as many rental units as we can get out of the ground.
I'd be interested in, I mean, honestly, let the developers, let the RFP recipients do the work. If we have consensus that we want it to be a rental project, great. There's step one. We probably have consensus that we want it to be a full-time occupied rental project. And then the difference between unencumbered by income requirements or 60% or 30%, whatever number you want, is really just a function of what will the developer ask for from us. So if we put the project out there with those parameters, rental, full-time occupant, and income requirements for everything from none at all to 60% AMI, they'll come back with the proposal and say, well, if you wanted me to build you a 60%, I need the land plus $1 million. If you want it to be no restrictions, then I'll pay you $2 million for the land. And then we have choices to make. But I don't think I don't think we need to sit here, because I don't think we're going to get there. Sit here and say, do we want this project to be this AMI, that AMI? That's not our strength without more data. And that data will come with a response. And then the neighbor is more than welcome to bid on it. He can dovetail it right in with whatever he wants to do. So now I don't want to diminish the benefits of a joint project, because he may have a leg up because of economies of scale that nobody else can match. And we can then decide from there.
Again, though, I just want to maybe state this a different way, is that the RFP, we're kind of in this twist in the conversation. We're sort of saying that the only path to rentals is to put it out to RFP. And I think in our previous conversations, we've been saying, well, we might want to just sell the land. We might want to give the land away. We might want to do this. We might want to do that. And I think those are the choices that we can frame up before choosing. And it may land on, okay, let's put certain mechanisms in place and then put it out to RFP, bam, and move it forward. But that's not the only way to get affordable rentals on this property. So I think we're kind of, I'm surprised, because I thought our last conversation, we were really excited about the idea of placing a deed restriction on the land and evaluating the different tools. And now we're like ready to put it out to RFP. And I think we're like really far apart on that.
Me, Melissa, I think it's not, because whatever ends up, how we go down that to get rentals is a deed restriction on that land to say that that land needs to have rental units on it. So I'm not changing the conversation around, like, we're encumbering it with something, call it a deed restriction or a rental mandate or however that works. I think I kind of see it the way Andrew just pointed out, is all of those things are on the table for me. And I don't really personally have the background that obviously you do, but I think until we get ideas from developers, I don't know what the best way to leverage and utilize that land to get rentals on. And that's where I want to see the professionals come back and say, what Andrew, the point Andrew just said, we need this much money and the lot, or just the lot, and we can get you this much. And then we come back and say, all right, is that, like, can we make that work? And I don't think that's, Don's ready to jump in. Go for it, Don.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So Eva mentioned earlier that we had drafted up an RFP, and we did do that back in February, I believe, actually. And one of the reason we got to a stopping point is we heard some conflicting direction from council members through the town manager at the time that, you know what, maybe we should be doing a LIHTC project on this, or what's the AMI? And so this gets back to the question that Melissa asked, what is our goal? Okay, we've got it down to rental, but do we want a certain AMI target? Do we want a range of AMIs? And I think that's really the discussion and the ultimately the decision that council needs to make is what is our goal for this project? Do we want it to be just occupancy only deed restrictions? Or do we want to have a lower AMI, which as Councilman Aaron said, noted, that brings up the subsidy that will be required to make the project happen. So that's really the discussion that we need to have as a council and to gather that direction.
Maybe I think hearing that, and I appreciate that, Don, is that, you know, as Dan said, let's keep this on the focus and we'll kind of highlight this to bring back to hone in on some of that.
We'll bring you back, you know, different stipulations, conditions, scenarios, so that you can hopefully come to a mutually agreed upon point. But we got the message. I think we know what to bring back to.
I would just like to say that, you know, we've briefly touched on this AMI discussion, and it is really broad. And I think we could go around forever discussing what AMIs are right and what AMIs are wrong. And as Melissa has brought up before, you know, just the way AMIs are laid out, it excludes some of the people you want to try to put in there because they're, you know, combined incomes and or whatever else. I would like to, like, you know, maybe we get from staff, you know, it's good to be within this AMI or something at some point, you know, at least your opinion on this, you know, because otherwise it's all going to be arbitrary as far as, well, we're going to do however many units at 30% AMI and however many units at 120% AMI. And like, you know, it's all really arbitrary until we actually know what's at stake, you know, and so partially, so now I'm getting a little conflicted as far as like, I'm partially feeling that maybe we do put it out to RFP to get back some more of this input as far as, and maybe, you know, how without RFP do we get some of this input as far as, you know, what are the things we really want to do here? What do we need? You know, do we need to plug in $1 million to this property in order to get 22 units or whatever at a certain AMI, you know, because we're going to go around in circles about AMI, you know, and I don't think we're going to land anywhere because, you know, this is a dial that's all over the place.
Sure, absolutely. And we do have this tool called the Housing Needs Assessment that was finalized and granted. It was finalized March 5th of 2020, and then everything changed the next day. That said, we do have a tool. We do have some data. We do know what developments have happened. We do know some of the trends. We do know what the needs are. So we could take a look at that and build off of that. Say, if we are trying to accomplish and fill this portion, if you remember, go back to that housing bridge in the dial, where we say, okay, we want to have this spectrum of various housing types. With this project, we would like to fill a portion of this and a portion of this one. Well, we can do that. We can draft an RFP around that. But that's really kind of the feedback that we're going to need to, maybe we'll flesh it out a little bit on our end to develop those options of, okay, if we think based on the housing needs assessment that we should maybe look at these areas here, these ranges of AMIs, whatever else, bring it back to you and then craft an RFP around that.
Don, I think that's right on, and that's what I'm looking for, is some structured discussion around this particular property, so that we can make a well-informed decision about putting it out to RFP, what's in the RFP, you know, how much is in the RFP, et cetera.
You know, what's going on in I think it was Moab and Grant County over there in terms of how they're approaching building units like this, and the two different approaches they had. They had the PAD and then they had the H. And the one that seemed to be popular was the one that said, look, this is not about AMIs. This is about putting local workforce people in the units. And in my mind, it's, you know, just, I think you use this housing helps kind of as your template. And it's like, you know, you can do market rentals, and then we just come back with our program and we put the money underneath the rental depending on who applies. And then all that kind of goes away. So you build it, and whoever builds it knows he's going to get market rents because we guarantee that. Or you follow that model in Moab, where you just say the deed restriction is, you know, 80% of this has to be for people who meet our workforce criteria, which is and you kind of get a little bit about remote workers, and then you don't worry about it because they're market units and we come back with our housing helps dollars and whoever fills the units fills them, whether they're 30% or 190%, it doesn't matter. If they approach market, there's no subsidy. If they're, we put the dollars underneath it. So, and that's the funding model for the project because whoever doesn't need to worry about that. So you don't have to jump through all those and try and decide I'm building for that guy, but not for that guy. It's like any other housing project. They're available. And if it's lottery or sign up, however it works, if you get, 50 people sign up for 22 units, do a lottery and get them in there, qualify them and put the money under each unit as you need to. In the meantime, the project can move forward with the kind of funding that it needs. So, but I like that idea of what they're doing in Moab because it sounds like that's what they did. They just said, if you're going to live here, you're this worker and that's it. It wasn't income qualified. And it sounded like the developers responded very positively to that model. And so I don't think we need to invent a unique model. I think we look at what's working, and in that case, that is, and kind of bring that our own sensibility to it. But I don't think we need to have that discussion about this is a more valuable member of our community because we think that it represents this typology of worker. I don't want to go down that road. I just want to build a unit and get a local worker in it. And if we got to help them out, we help them out.
So I guess maybe if I could summarize the direction I'm hearing from council, so we can move on to the next page 2, is first of all, I do like the one suggestion about getting appraisal now, find out what the properties actually were. So we do have an idea. I think that'd be valuable to go ahead and do that. So if council agrees, we'll go ahead and head that way. It looks like a few thumbs up anyways. Next step, reach out to the adjacent property owner, Glassman, just to, again, see what sort of interest there may or may not be in developing a partnership in a timely manner, as maybe one of the keys there as well. And then third is take a look at the various options that might be out there. The Moab example that Council Member Fallon just mentioned, or some of the more traditional models of, okay, we want to hit this AMI target or whatever else, and then bring that back for discussion and at some point in the near future. Does that summarize most of what we're looking at with this?
Don, just for clarity's sake, when you go talk to the neighboring property owner, the whole deal fell apart because the financing got super complicated in the long run, okay, over the course of that project. We all know that, okay? That's not what we're looking for. The Moab project.
We want X. How would you propose to get that you would get us to X, Mr. Glassman?
And I don't want to do several more months of, this is a great project, this is awesome. And then we're into this for 3-6 months. And then all of a sudden this overly complicated funding mechanism comes into play.
Absolutely. So we can, that's a very good point, and we'll take that guidance into our conversations with him.
Good summary.
Any other comments on 275?
We got the appraisal out of the way. Whirlwind, where did you point us next, Eva? Sorry.
Sure. I think we could jump to policy and regulatory measures. I think one of the priorities that council identified at the last session was an incentivization program to get long-term rentals. That could be, i.e., short-term rentals to long-term rentals, folks that have never rented before and maybe could be interested for a short period of time to rent, maybe for a 6-month period or for a year. And basically kind of discuss that as a priority if you guys want to. We would certainly need to come back with a more well-rounded package for you to see that as a pilot program, with some potential dollar numbers and things like that. Would we administer it? Who would administer it? That kind of thing.
I think that in terms of kind of creating, I don't want to say instant capacity, but our best bet to create capacity in the short term is to look at adaptive use of hotels and to find out who in the short-term market has those blocks of time, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months or longer. There's going to be, I think, a lot of 3 month, 6 month, 9 month opportunities in that market for those kind of units. And to me, the math is pretty simple. You know what the market, it's pretty well established what market rental rates are. Short-term rentals kind of come encumbered with their own costs. And I think if you come back to that long-term market rate, rental rate, I think it's a good number to work off of. And you don't just have to just approach that number from a short-term rental perspective in terms of that rent down, if you will. I think that's what I called it a couple of years ago. I was calling it a rent down or whatever. But, there's got to be some other aspects. And I think we need to go back to that program that FERC ran years ago, where, they guaranteed the lease, vetted the tenants. I think there has to be an inspection component, because I think the biggest concern with a lot of people with these properties is that their investment and their derivative use then is going to be compromised by irresponsible use. And I think people who get into the program need to come in aware of the covenants, have covenants assigned to their participation in the program, especially if we're putting money into that to get them down to whatever AMI rate that they might qualify for, right? So if we're putting a 40% person in this unit for 3 months because it's a landing pad unit and we're coming up with that money, it has to get inspected every month. There has to be some accountability on their part, but there should also be a way that person can matriculate out of that program with some merit, so that if he stays in that person stays in the program and he matriculates to 6 months somewhere else or gets into a year lease somewhere else, that there's some value to his good performance. And I've been trying to bake this in my head, and I'm not sure if it's, something on the back end of with their security deposit to enhance that for good performance, but you have to incentivize that performance somehow. So if they want to stay in the program, that they take care of the properties. And that's why Airbnb and VRBO works. You cannot rent if you don't have good reviews as a guest. No one's going to rent to you. Now, that's what's missing in this piece, is that you've got people who are coming in, they're going to land for 3 months, maybe they stay for 3 months or 4 months and they leave. What is their skin in the game to make sure that those properties are going to be protected, and then stay in that program for a long time for that use, because we have to be able to demonstrate that. So, but that's something that we can do right away. And we're reading about it and all the tools that you provided that municipalities are applying across the West. This is something that keeps popping up, and you've got to get to that number, and you've got to use that benchmark. If it's a 4-bedroom and it's 4,000 a month, whatever the number is, then you can work down with that on your AMI scale to say, all right, we have to put $1,600 a month into this to get that person in there and write that check and guarantee that lease, So then I think people know that we're in it, but that has to be the number, So I think people are interested, but they've got to have some security on the backside of that.
For me, I think I agree. I don't disagree with anything Dan said. I think it's still that trying to figure out a way to incentivize those. I think it still is one of the higher priorities for me, and what that looks like. I mean, I think the big hurdle will always be the majority of them, I think, are people who use them 1 or 2 weeks of the year, and they're random and they want them and they want to leave their ski gear here or their bikes. But whatever we can do if we can get a couple, we get a couple. And I think that's huge. Like it's
Get 10 units, you get 10.
it's awesome. Take it. So I'd still look at that.
People, I think I've shared that with some of you. We've got a couple people that have reached out to me just recently. They may have recently purchased it, or they've been an owner and have not been renting it. So there aren't guest bookings sort of blocking or barriering them from being able to have a long-term rental in there. And they're ready to go. They're just kind of seeking what can the town put together for some subsidy for them, ensure that they, would do a background check on the tenant, who's going to be in there, who would maintain it, maintenance, property management, that kind of thing. If we would do that internally or outsource it, depending on how many units we could actually convert or get into a program, would probably determine that, right?
Yeah, and I think you have to get started and see how it modulates, so, but I don't think it's wrong to start a little high, get people in and see how it performs. And that's going to inform your leases as they come in, as they come on board down the line. You know, you're going to come up with your discount mechanisms for length of lease, for various kinds of securities or guarantees on the back end. So, yeah, I think you just got to kind of write down that list, that kind of create that little pro forma and then assign some numbers to it. But I think you're right. I think there's people ready to jump. They just want to see what the number's going to be. You know, there's no doubt that for most people, it's, you know, it's not I don't think it's a big investment play, because there's, for that cash, there's better ways to make money in the market. You know, it's really that use derivative. And you've got to figure out to navigate around their use, you know, their use of it. And again, the 3-month, even 2-month, you know, a month landing pad for somebody who's coming into town, I think it's all viable. But what the clearinghouse looks like, what the waiting list looks like, how people sign up, again, the covenants they have to agree to for performance, those all have to be articulated.
Well, and some of those, you know, we did an STR survey that we'd like to bring back, if we would bring back the program to share those results with you, but some of the folks shared in some of their responses, you know, there's concern of getting the tenant out of their property. So if you're doing a 3-month lease or a 6-month lease, knowing that the owner is coming back to use the property for the summer stint or the winter stint, making sure the tenant does leave, right? If the tenant can't find other housing or they've lost their job, there was some concern around evictions and things like that at one point. So that's just some things that have been shared through that survey, that obviously we need to come back and share those results with you.
Yeah, I think that your fallback plan might be adaptive use of hotels. It could be, hey, you know, we can put, you know, you got a month here, or you have 6 weeks or something like that. So we just have to have a relationship where we can get into those rooms when they're available and make that same arrangement with hotel properties who are willing to participate and make those same guarantees and have that same cash ready to play. And that's why I think it's really important to have that liquidity with our 5A dollars and not have them tied up in big projects. And I think it's really important to, especially if we're looking at 2.16% on COPs, you know, to be able to look at getting those projects out of the ground and finance with that. So our $5 million, $6 million can aggressively be buying down. You know, we can commit large amounts of dollars to hotels if it's a block of rooms that we need to sit on, for landing pad units, or for the situations where somebody's in for a month, they're in a hotel for a month, they're back in their unit for, you know, for 6 months. You know, we have to have that flexibility, and we have to build that liquidity into the plan.
And ask Dan, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but how are we looking for seasonal positions for the winter? Do we have an idea of? Okay. Okay.
We're doing okay, but that's usually where we are. Yeah.
So we know we need some housing to potentially to help fill some positions. Yeah, okay. Okay, just wanted to make sure that we were on the same.
We'll bring you back a similar litany of measures and structure for this program, so you can review it and give us some direction. This one we need to move a little faster because these opportunities are present. So we'll bring you something back on this next meeting. And we want this for, as Diane just pointed out, we need this for the season. So if you need to start creating compensation packages that include a hotel room, for example, or 4 months, you know, we need to be able to put that in front of people. So you do that aggressive job fair, and this is something I brought up before too, where if you come up with those units and come up with that space, now you can do a job fair because now you got housing. And then you can take that on the road if you want to. You don't have to do that, you know, you can take it to Denver, you know, and find people down there who are just looking for a way to get up here. So I think we go to where the people are, but we can't go there until we have a package that they're ready.
And Centura has rented a couple of rooms at the Ramada for their seasonal staff trying to come in for the winter season. So folks have gone creative with that, with the adaptive reuse.
Just for that sort of thing, you know, how many employees are we needing? How many units are we needing? You know, that we can identify, if straight away we can identify that we need X amount. We can know what we're putting to it either from 5A or from other funds that we end up seeking.
So there's going to be an outreach conversation with lodging partners that we would want to facilitate to kind of take the temperature around the town. I think it's kind of almost an ironic twist on the lodging situation right now, where short-term rentals, are kind of making, come back around to the original lodging properties to say, to hotels to say, hey, you know what? Let's see what we can do to make this worth your while, and we're going to change your use and your conventional utilization. And we're going to bring some money to the table. And what do you think about these guaranteed deals? And I think the sooner we do that, the better. Yeah, really, it is on the table with short-term rentals. I've rented personally 4 units in this town, short-term for a month. And it's just a matter of, every owner has their number that they need to get. And, we might hit a few short-term rental owners that would be happy with getting whatever, $4,000 for a month, out of their house instead of doing it, every other weekend. And so, that could be a way to tie that in as well to, maybe try to flip some of the SDRs. It's not flipping anything because it still ends up being through Airbnb, but the owners have a decision that they can decide to take it off the market at that point because it's then sure money. And, I don't know about that we need to include property management and all that along with, because I don't think that's our business but we should be assuring the renter that's going in to the owner.
Didn't you want to bid for property management? Is
I've
that still-
talked to, so the FERC is no longer administering that that program they used to call Housing Works Initiative. But they did feed it over to Anne Marie Oley at Omni Real Estate. She and I had a couple of conversations to sort of plant the seed, knowing that we might be trying to create a pilot program for incentivizing long-term rentals. She's looking to partner potentially, wants to do a community benefit, and would only charge 6% of the gross rental revenue to administer the leases, the background checks, the inspections, provide property management, do the move in, the move out, those kind of things. So it takes the pressure off of staff at town for sure, to sort of administer all of those pieces, because we don't know how many we may or may not get through this. So having sort of a partner in that to help manage that program for us could be a real win for owners to know that their property could be taken care of. So yes.
We'll bring her in next week. And
Yeah.
I can't believe it's
Yes,
a
I
great
can start.
organization. What is unanswered on kind of the direction? It sounds like that's a top priority, obviously. Do you need more or any clarifying questions from your notes?
Does council have a temperature on if someone is already long-term renting? And sort of would come to the town looking for some subsidy because they're doing the right thing, but maybe they're charging market rate. They could rent to someone in Denver or Front Ranger, but in order to incentivize them to sign a lease with someone who works here locally, would they be eligible to apply for the program?
If they're meeting the criteria that you established for the program, which is whatever criteria you define local workforce as, and they bring in the lease and they demonstrate that then yeah, you just fill the delta the way you would normally. I think if they demonstrate it's been ongoing, I don't think it has to be retroactive necessarily to some degree, but I mean, you could look back at some number of months, but you can just say, well, let's get you in the program right now.
Big Sky Montana sort of set a threshold to go. And Melissa, can you hear me okay? I'm not sure with the mask. Make sure she can hear me. Okay, good. So Big Sky Montana sort of did, when they implemented their program, they did a retroact like 6 months back. So anybody sort of in that time frame could maybe apply, but anyone who's sort of done at least 8 months or longer, maybe
Nice
next
incentive.
go around. So they're kind of doing a first come, first serve in their program as a pilot to really incentivize people now to come into the program.
I'm confused. What's the benefit if you have somebody who is renting a place because they can afford to? What's the purpose of subsidizing that person?
That's the question that I'm asking, basically. We've had a couple of,
An assumption that that's why they're doing it, so, they could have inherited that situation. They could be doing it because that's the person who was in there. They didn't want to raise the rents, but so they're kind of altruistically for the short term. taking the beating, but it does not preclude them from finally saying, you know, when their next lease is turned up, to say, you know what, I've got to go to market because it turns out my kid needs shoes for his basketball camp, you know? So I don't think you want to count on that altruism. And I think you want to incentivize people to get into the program. And the more people you bring into the program, the more they're going to broadcast it. And I think that's going to help engender its success. So I don't think you're going to alienate those people who are doing the right thing. And I can think of 2 people right now who would qualify for that program because they're doing it because they just didn't want to raise the rents. And yeah, they're making their nut, but I think they'd like to say, yeah, I'm doing that too. It's like the commercials that you see for new customers, but old customers don't get the deal, you know, and you're like, well, I'm not an old customer. I should be able to get 6 months of whatever it is. And they should, because they're doing what we're asking people to do. And
The criteria, sort of like what we did with the emergency rental assistance. We set a criteria that you had to work in Frisco
Yeah.
or live in Frisco as an example. So not everybody who's doing a long-term rental necessarily could qualify, depending on who their occupant is and maybe where their occupant is working. So remote workers, would they qualify as a long-term rental? We'd have to maybe define that with some better criteria for the program.
And at the end of the day, you could have your tenant, you could terminate the lease and just write them a new lease to start the program. So, yeah.
Well, and this will take this a little longer, but I think what I'm hearing Andy say is a question I asked a few years ago about subsidizing, I guess it was renting. So a couple of things. One is this check, at the end of the day, is this check going to go to that property owner, or is this check going to go to the rentor? And the short answer for Andy is it keeps that person here in their job, and instead of having them leave to go to wherever, and then that unit rolls over into another, whatever occupancy type that looks like, is kind of where I landed on that situation. But the question for the program is, to me, we created all those rental assistance programs criteria. I think for a program like this, it's work, live 30 hours a week. We have that written. We're done. We don't need to do that brain damage, or you guys don't. Right? So I would just be curious, maybe I misunderstood it, but I still don't know. And maybe there's 2 different programs. One's for the owner and one's for the leaser. But I don't want to, again, talk in circles. So
Sure.
forgive me for complicating it.
So it was just a question I wanted to ponder as we try and create sort of the program and the criteria of what we're trying to target with the long-term lease and the occupant at hand, and what are we trying to subsidize? So if it's someone converting a short-term rental to a long-term rental, the subsidy is going to be greatly different than someone who's already long-term renting, potentially at a lower rate than market rate, and is looking to subsidize the gap between that. So like as an individual that's reached out to me on Granite Street, he's got 2 properties. He's been renting to someone in the Front Range, could very easily charge $2,800 a month. He's signed leases with Front Rangers, but he's looking to maybe work with the town to sign a lease at like $2,200 for a 2-bedroom and subsidize the difference between the $2,800 and the $2,200 to put a local in there versus signing a lease with the Front Rangers. So if I multiplied that times 12 months, we're talking like $3,500 to subsidize somebody who's doing a long-term lease already. If someone's converting a property, it's a different subsidy.
It may be, but I mean, the mechanism or the algorithm is really going to be the same.
But does that answer your question, Andrew? Because you still look skeptical.
You look perplexed.
Well, it's a nuance that I don't think we'll hash through, but if I'm generously renting to somebody for 2,000, or not even generously, we made our deal. And he's renting from me for 2,000 a month, and we collectively go into the town and say, market rate's 2,500. I just picked up a free $500, even though he was able to, they made their deal. To me, that's what market rate is. A willing landlord and a willing tenant creates a market deal. It's just.
But we converted that rental we brought that rental into the program.
But into the program is only as long as the landlord wants it in there, right?
Yes.
I mean, this really isn't a program. because
It's a-
if the landlord doesn't like it, he's out of the program.
It's the duration of the lease.
Yeah, it's writing a check every month to support the tenant for as long as the landlord wants to accept that check.
I was going along, you're right, yep.
Once the town starts subsidizing the new renters, right, instead of the existing ones, you've just set up an incentive on the part of that owner to let that lease terminate. Right, because now he goes into the town, he doesn't have anybody existing in that unit, right? What you've just done is give him a $500, $6,000 a year, if it's 500 a month, incentive to say to that lessee at the end of the term, I love you, but I don't love you $6,000 a year. You got to go, because with you in here, I can't get a subsidy from the town. Without you in here, I can.
It could be you got to go on Monday and then let's sign a new lease on Tuesday because I like you. It's just noodling through on this.
Yeah, just be
You know,
careful
'cause-
about those based on assumptions, because they're not all the same. I think you can't make that. Again, I know two people who specifically are in that position doing it, and they're doing it because the person who was in it when they bought the property had nowhere to go, couldn't afford any more, and they said, I'll make it work for as long as I can.
Yeah.
You know, and so they sign a lease, and that's the precondition, which is great. It's very altruistic, but it's not because this person is in a beneficent position necessarily, you know, that's not why. They're doing it because they're trying to make it work for that person for as long as they can, but at some point it doesn't work for the landlord anymore. What we're trying to do is kind of preempt that, what you just, you know, we're trying to preempt that transition where he's like, sorry, I gotta go to $4,000 because I got a family, you know, it's an investment.
What if?
What's the
what
question
if-
you're asking? us?
I think we.
Do we like this idea of subsidizing
From
rent?
rental conversation into more of like a bigger rental conversation along how do we maintain more long-term rentals?
I would, can I
Are we
just,
willing to subsidize rents for tenants who can't afford the market rate of the unit they're in?
Whether pre-existing or new.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead, Melissa.
thank you. I think, you know, one reason we struggle on this is we just don't have data to go on. And so, again, we're kind of noodling ideas, but they're not really grounded in solid data. And so as not to overthink it, I would suggest maybe we think of a very simple approach. Maybe it's, I'm just throwing a round number out there for just to make the point, say $200 per bedroom, right? See if a very simple model actually got traction, and then refine and adjust as needed. I think that if we opened it up, if I'm following the conversation, it's a little bit hard remotely, as you guys know. But you know, if we overthink it and we try and, you know, have every single home is a unique situation is a unique subsidy, is a different amount of money, that is just going to be incredibly difficult to monitor, to enforce, to really understand if it's working, if people are taking advantage of it or not. So if we do go down this road, I would like to see it simplified. We're a small town. We don't have that many units. This would maybe generate a handful. Maybe it would become hugely popular and we're offering too much, but we can adjust as needed. So just an idea, Eva, for you to consider. Maybe it's been done before, but something very simple. Maybe it's per bedroom, maybe it's based on square footage. I don't know, but something that's really a simple metric that could actually get it off the ground. And I guess at the heart of the question is, do I support this? Absolutely. I think somehow we need to incentivize our owners to put their units in long-term rentals. That's what got me to Frisco, an affordable long-term rental. I would not be able to move to Frisco at this time because they're too expensive, and it'd be great to bring that option back for working people in Frisco.
So I think what I'm hearing, Eva, is I think you've heard on the short-term rental, let's figure out what those incentives are on the short-term rental side. And I think on the long-term to local long-term rental, we need to have continued conversation and carve those two into two separate. So we'll work back in as we continue these conversations, because it went from short-term rental to long-term rental to long-term rental to local long-term rental, LLRT. But so I think we'll come back and I think maybe we'll address that converting of, what those lose are. But I don't think so. I think they're total, I think that's why we're going in circles. Because I think a short-term rental by nature is not long-term, so there's no alignment. I think if we get a few of the program and figure out like what that works, then we can address, because we've got to be careful because we're quickly going down a rent control conversation, which makes me a little nervous with that sitting there.
No, we're actually better than we were. The legislature largely fixed our rent control issue.
All right, well, that's a relief. Not until public comment. Hey, thank you.
I mean, from a model standpoint, are we, the last part of this conversation, wasn't it pretty much a Section 8 program? Where we have to evaluate how much what's the market rate, what's the tenant available to afford, and we fill the gap.
That's it.
That's, I mean,
For any property, no, doesn't matter. You just use the same baseline.
But the short-term part is still a different avenue because we've got
It's not
length of
necessary.
lease.
It doesn't necessarily have to be.
All right. We'll work towards.
lot of Bible back
Case
there.
of history, know your history.
And I'll explain right away.
What more do we make that muddy enough?
Bring something back to you to more refine your position. This programs we've looked at from Truck Heat and Winter Park. Big Sky, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We'll lay out the different options and hopefully you'll arrive at which set of options you prefer.
Thanks. Funding and finance, I would, yeah.
Didn't bring up that might be very simple. Like 1 month fix. If council agrees is, have we ever, I don't, now I can't even remember if we've discussed this or not in these conversations, but if someone comes to community development office with a building application that has a workforce unit, workforce rental unit, or a deed restricted unit, however they might get those, that they go to the top of the pack, the top of the schedule, they're prioritized through the entire system, and everybody else gets set below them because the $4 million scrape and rebuild doesn't accomplish our goals of getting units filled. And if somebody wants to come to us and say, I'm going to scrape and I'm going to rebuild, but I'm going to add 2 units of whatever they might be that brings a restriction, then we can say, great, you just made, the sketch planning commission, you're the first agenda item, and then they take priority through our entire process. Is that, Don, go ahead.
I think that is something that we could do as a policy. It doesn't require any ordinance or anything like that, but I think certainly there could be some concern raised by non-workforce housing developers that, hey, I'm getting pushed down to the bottom. Why am I getting not deprioritized or whatever else? So I think as a staff, we would appreciate probably a very clear policy direction on that. And it may be worth a little bit more of actually writing up that policy and presenting that at an upcoming meeting.
Yeah.
But that certainly could be done fairly quickly.
Not like that.
No, I like it I like it in theory, but I think we got to break it down a little bit. Because again, there's some assumptions there that you're basing that on that just don't always play. And to come up with a policy that broad on one general assumption about you're trying to push back against a certain kind of development excludes a lot of marginal developments that are just going to be pushed back for no reason, because their intent is not to be anti-workforce by the nature of their development. So I struggle a little bit with a policy that's that well intentioned, but I think you have to talk about some unintended consequences first to the degree that you can try and anticipate them. So I think, yes, let's talk about it some more because I think it has merit, but I think you want to make sure that there's certain conditions that you introduce.
Flesh out whether that applies to a market remodel. Does that get bumped down the list, or is it new housing starts only, or things like that? So certainly that's things that we will draft up and clarify and bring back to you all as options.
Solve a crisis. I'm sorry, but some people are going to take a backseat,
Some,
in my opinion.
Some, yeah.
Bummer.
Well, no, but some.
Yeah.
But let's be clear about what those some are and what those assumptions are that you're trying to.
Yeah, I'm all about it.
That's all.
Sorry, I didn't mean to add another call, but that seems like something we can do maybe a little quicker. Finance was the
I like
next-
that idea. Just to chime in, I think it's a good one, and I agree with you, Hunter.
Thanks, Melissa, for jumping in. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I keep looking up there and bouncing to my computer screen of the staff report. Finance was the next spot we're jumping to.
Yes. Funding and finance. So I think any nature of any of the projects that we've sort of talked about or the programs, we can certainly continue as staff to look at pursuing other alternatives for some funding mechanisms, whatever that might be. If it's a grant or leveraging funds and doing something with financing and loans or whatever, we'll continue to certainly look at those options as we continue to create programs, incentivizations, things like that. So just wanted to state that. And then I think one of those under that topic was the real estate investment fee. Obviously, we talked a little bit that council has the opportunity to adopt a policy to allocate a certain amount or percentage of those revenues towards housing expenditures. Adoption of such policy could be discussed at a later time. I think you guys talked maybe a little bit out. Did you guys talk about it during your budget cycle at all? The REEF and,
No.
okay.
We'll bring it back.
And so we do have a locals exemption as part of that. And so we could certainly evaluate that at a later time with council. But there's certainly currently that it does exist in the code. And so if we made any changes to that, it would have to be done by an ordinance, I believe.
Local exemption on the 1%. For example, we got a case right now where a person is just above the AMI, look at maybe increasing that for locals. And also the threshold for their equity of $10,000. I mean, I think Dad mentioned me. My bike costs more than $10,000. I wouldn't qualify. It's not realistic. Clothes cost more than that.
What is the locals exemption?
Sure. So it's for those who wish to apply. They have to, let me just read through it. I actually had to pull it from the code. Qualified purchasers must have worked and or lived within the town of Frisco, not just Summit County, for the 12 months prior to applying. And then qualified residents and or employees will also need to meet specific income requirements. And so anyone that is eligible, you can apply for a locals exemption based on your AMI. And so I think number A is a qualified purchaser who earns less than 80%. It basically takes off $200,000 off the purchase price to reduce what they would pay in the real estate transfer fee. The next tier is 80 to 100%. That would knock off $175,000 off the purchase price to reduce the real estate transfer fee. Someone who earns between 100 and 120%, the first $100,000 off the purchase price. So it's sort of a tiered effect. And then to the point of Tony's, assets cannot exceed $10,000, does not include clothing, furnishings, autos, or retirement accounts. So in the particular case with that one, I think the transaction's a $875,000 property.
Yeah, and I don't know when that came up, maybe $200,000 was, 5 years ago was a significant larger portion of the buy price. So maybe that should shift to just a percentage. So it travels with as prices go up and down.
I agree, looking at all those and bringing that back. Was that a affirmative head nod?
Does that go by ordinance? If you change that? Yeah.
Pulling up the section right now.
Just kind of
but yes,
seeing.
yes, it'll require an ordinance.
Having the direction on, we talked about maybe earmarking a percentage. Avon, for example, is 20% of your transfer fee revenue for housing. Do you want to do something like that now? Or
Why would we do that as opposed to just through the standard budget process?
Yeah, because it sets a more consistent standard we can rely upon every year, especially if we're going to finance. We're going to need to know basically how much can we rely upon from that source. If it's volatile, changes year to year, impossible to use that source as a collateral on our debt. See what happens with 5A.
Yeah, I think Dan's point is a good one.
5A are existing revenue stream. We're trying to add to that. And the other one is clearly the excise tax.
Yeah.
If you're interested in that.
There's a big difference. One is you're just sort of taking our money and moving our money over to a different space. The other one, sorry, Melissa. One of them, you're taking our money and moving it just to a different column that's still our money. The other one, you're creating new money.
Yeah.
So
But
I-
you're pledging that to housing, which you then. can
Until we
use for
unpledge it.
financing. Yeah,
If it helps us with financing, it might be
Yeah.
worth pursuing, but.
yeah, I appreciate that distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, because it's about $400,000 a year. I mean, that could pay the debt service on about a $5 million cut annually.
But Tony, they're not going to accept that unless it's statutory and we can't undo it.
No, you reflected in the finance agreement, to be obligated.
Piece.
Yeah.
I think the issue with COPs is going to be that you're not going to be able to use the property, right, the apartment or the residential property
No.
as the collateral, right? They're going to require some other indispensable property of the town. Well, we're fresh out of indispensable properties, I think. We got COPs on this building, we got COPs on Public Works to finance the
I've used
marina.
Your biggest asset are your roads. I've used roads as collateral.
I want to meet your bond lawyer.
Get past it.
But you-
Get it
Not,
Kansas
not in
City.
Colorado, though. You hold the roads in trust for the public. How are you gonna give, set them up as collateral? I don't think you can in Colorado. In
I'll
Colorado,
show-
you use the
I'll show
road
you
as a
the top.
COP.
Yeah,
I think on
Which
the- on the,
municipality? Which-
Canyon City.
We'll get back to the investment fee question.
What bond lawyer signed off on it?
Gentlemen, please, thank you.
And I think just the only other thing that I wanted to sort of share on good news is on the housing assistance programs that we have. I am closing 2 housing helps transactions, down payment assistance on a purchase on Monday. So Mayor just actually and some other folks just signed off on those. We're working with land title. And so just wanted to share that to sort of end us on a high note.
Can you
There
share
was
the
anything
details
else?
of those once they're finalized?
I'd be happy to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to see the breakdown and what kind of, and obviously not the address necessarily for the public, but I'd love to see where that landed us. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah. Congratulations and thank you. Is there anything else that wasn't addressed or concerns or questions for staff?
There were some other items on here that we haven't discussed. What's the expectation on those? We don't need to discuss them all. Don't want us giving false expectation.
We can bring them back. I mean, this is, especially, I think we dealt with some of the short-term actions, and then we can bring back, there's some midterm actions
Mhm.
over 1-3 years. We'll bring them back next couple of meetings.
We can start carving some out to the ones we are working on, the ones that are still available for discussion
I
or.
didn't want them to be given as
No.
tacit approval because we
No, no,
didn't
no.
object.
Yep, no.
we're just gonna
There's some in
phase
there. I
them.
don't.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Questions? At this time, Mr. Walsh, I will open it up to public comment with the caveat that I did allow you to make your public comment earlier, even though it was on a top agendized topic for this evening. I think your tone, tenor, and disrespect for this council is greatly disingenuous to what you've been done, especially with the compliments you were about to get. And because this is a discussion this evening and not an ordinance, I don't have to, but out of respect to you, I am willing to open it up to public comment, and please keep your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last time I was here, the person who followed me mumbled incohesively for well over 5 minutes. You didn't say a thing to him. The thing I wanted to bring up on this specific topic is you're talking about people renting below market rent as altruism. I think it's probably just experienced landlords that understand lowering your rent can provide a better tenant, especially people experienced with renting long-term. So often people will reduce rent to keep a good tenant. And so if you de-incentivize short-term rentals and put people in a position to either use their property, leave it vacant, or rent long-term, they'll ultimately reduce rent to have a good long-term tenant. And if they don't want to rent their property, fine, then we need less workforce to house, to deal with less tourism.
Thank you. Anything else on this topic? Great. Next up is to adjourn. Motion? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Good conversation. Thanks, Eva, Bill, Don. Thanks, Hayes.
you.